Shawn, dude, welcome to the podcast. We got linked up, man, it's been months now, by our mutual good friend, Chris Tudis, man. Chris is an amazing human being. I remember when Chris and I were talking about AI and the projects that he had going on. And we just kept having this exchange about just technology and just things moving forward. And he was like, man, you really need to talk to my partner, Shawn. And he had kind of built you up. And then I think when we finally got on our first meet just to talk, I was I don't know I was thoroughly moved by our conversation and just the depth of knowledge, obviously with your background. And we'll get into your background on the intro, but I'm excited to have you here. So for all the audience that's listening, today is going to be a very tech savvy conversation. This will be something completely different than we've done on this podcast. But I think for those of you that own businesses or dabble with AI, you're going to learn a lot out of this interview. So I just want to be upfront about what this interview is. I know we've had, Shawn's not a veteran, which doesn't really matter. He's got just an awesome story, and he has a base of knowledge that you're going to want to stay tuned for this. And I guarantee most of you are probably going to listen to this at least twice. Shawn and I sat down last night for a sound check, and we're just talking about random stuff, and I found myself literally getting a pad of paper out and taking notes. That's the type of conversation that we're about to have today. So it's amazing to have Shawn in the studio, and I know you're busy. You're a big family guy, and you have a lot of projects going on. So I really appreciate you taking the time to carve some time out to talk to our audience.
I'm happy to be here, man. Anything I can do to help, that's why God put me here.
Yeah.
So.
Hey, one quick ask before we dive in. Month after month, 95% of the people who watch our content aren't even subscribed to the YouTube channel. If that's you, you can seriously help us out today by just subscribing. It costs nothing. It takes 2 seconds, and it can make a huge impact on everything we're building here. There's no podcasting agency behind us. We have no corporate backing. It's just me, a small team, and an audience that really cares. Subscribing is the simplest way to tell the algorithm that this content is worth spreading. And it's the simplest way to support the mission directly. So hit the button and join the community. We appreciate all of you. Now let's get to this podcast. Love that. Well, everybody gets an intro, so I'm going to give you yours. If you've read the news at any point in the last 3 years, you've been handed 2 stories about AI, and they can't both be true. The first story is that the machines are coming for you, for your job, your kid's job, your retirement, your privacy, your sanity. That we're a few years from robots that think, and not long after that from robots that decide who lives and who dies. The second story is that it's all hype, a bubble, a fad, snake oil in a hoodie, and the whole thing is going to pop and take a bunch of 401ks down with it. Here's the uncomfortable part. The polls say most of us have quietly decided the machines are winning. Half of Americans now say they're more worried about AI than excited about it. Most of us use it anyway. The most of us don't trust a word it says. We're using a thing more than ever and believing in it less than ever, all at the same time. That's not a technology problem, that's a fear problem, and nobody's sitting the everyman down and explaining the thing in plain English. The man across the table can. Shawn Ennis has spent 25 years in technology, an Auburn-trained engineer with 12 patents, a guy who built 3 companies and sold one of them to Oracle, and who now runs an AI company and hosts his own AI talk show every week. But that's not why he's here. He's here because he's the rare expert who doesn't talk like he's from San Francisco. He talks like a guy who has had to make a payroll. He's the one who's first showed me the door on all the stuff that I currently use and then walked me through it myself, and I haven't stopped using it since. So we're going to do one thing today. We're going to take the scariest, most hyped subject on earth and make it make sense for you. What AI actually is, how it actually works, where it's real and where it's a lie. And then we're going to walk it through the 4 doors it's already come through in your life, your home, your privacy, your paycheck, and the battlefield. What people talk about, what they're afraid of, and what's actually worth being afraid of. No hype, no doom, just the truth, slow enough to use. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Shawn Ennis.
Thanks, man.
Let's start kind of, a little bit at the beginning, before AI, before any of it, who were you? Because most people hear AI expert and they picture a 25-year-old in a hoodie in San Francisco, and you're not very much of that.
No, happily so. I grew up in South Florida. My parents relocated us to, as I say, LA, Lower Alabama. I remember my dad arguing with the principal to get me into typing school at high school because typing school wasn't for boys. You know, funny how those things are.
Yeah.
But no, I went to Auburn University, War Eagle, and I was in the first batch of software engineering at Auburn University.
What was software engineering then versus kind of how it's morphed today? I think that's important for people to understand.
Software engineering back then was all about project planning. You know, imagine if you're planning a party, right? You need to make sure, okay, we need these people, we need those people. You know, this is how we plan something out, how we execute it, how we clean up the aftermath. That was software engineering. Then a lot of things have changed. You know, some may have seen the quality of software degrade over time. Mm-hmm. And that is because the processes have changed to make things more efficient, right? Making it easier on the people who are executing. But a lot has changed in the years since. And the real driver now, as you can imagine, is AI. Because software in its core is just text, just words on a paper. And AI is pretty good at putting text to paper. The problem is you could put anything on paper, right? Mm-hmm. You could take the dumbest ideas and write them down. It takes a human to understand, hey, that's stupid, or hey, that's really smart. Mm-hmm. And this is really the gap that a lot of people see with AI today, is that AI can only be harnessed properly by a human. The idea of AI without humans is where people get in a lot of problems.
I saw a meme recently, and I'm going to screw this up, but it's a guy looking at a mushroom, and like the top of it's like, hey, you know, is this mushroom okay to eat? And then the next part of the picture is like him dead, and it's the AI. Hey, sorry, I responded to the wrong mushroom. I think I got it wrong, but hopefully we can fix it. You know, and I've seen a lot of that with AI. I'm kind of an AI aficionado. It's no secret. I don't have a staff. I have one editor that helps me, and AI helped me build this entire thing. I didn't know what equipment to use. I knew nothing about sound design. I knew nothing about podcasting. I'd never even watched YouTube, to be honest with you. And so, you know, AI has really helped us in this platform. But God, man, I've wrestled with that sucker. So where did you develop, like, you know, this tech, this idea of problem solving? When was that born in you, and what was that process like when you were younger?
Yeah, I mean, it came down to, I was born and I was one of those kids that their favorite word was why. Now, I have one of those. So you know, I always joke that the mother's curse is you're going to have one just like you. Mm. Father's curse is you're going to marry one just like your mother. But staying safe here, yes, that's really what drove it for me, is just understanding the why. Every problem has a reason. A lot of things in this world have no reason to it. But engineering problems are something that are born to be solved. They're mountains to be climbed. And there's a lot of fulfillment in helping get to that other side, because problems are usually driven by people, and engineers are the people who help solve problems. And the people who get those solutions are what we call delight. Delight is what drives an engineer, right? It's that first time you picked up your iPhone, right? And you're able to search. That first time you go to AI and you ask it a question and you get an answer, and you're like, wow. That's what drives an engineer. That wow.
I want to kind of set the stage before we really dive into this. You've got multiple patents. I mean, we talked at length last night about some of your accomplishments, and I know you're not a guy that likes to brag, but I think it's important to kind of set the stage for the audience so they kind of understand, the depth, and then we'll dive into the AI and how that changed for you, your engineering. So can you talk about some of the work that you've done in the past?
Certainly. So I got hired while still in college to work at an operations center doing fiber optics. And back in the 90s, the big thing that was driving everything, the internet, was being powered by fiber optics. And the really new thing was, how can we, instead of having to put multiple field stations between sites going across the United States or underwater, we could just increase the power of the optics. This is optical amplification. It was the thing right before .bomb, right? And that's really where I jumped into telco. And telco has a lot of military.
Telco, you're referring to telecommunications?
Telecommunications, yeah. So fiber optics, and telecom is what drove the internet. And so I was incredibly lucky to be there right before the .com, and everything exploded. So the point was, 6 months before I graduated college, I'm doing consulting gigs around the world.
Oh, wow.
Right. 6 months after graduating college, I am working for the top consulting firm, Accenture back then, helping the #1 largest underwater fiber optic company in the world, Tyco back then, and helping them solve problems that were just huge. And I was incredibly lucky. I say this every day, that my timing of my career really accelerated me 10, 15 years. And, if it wasn't for that technology boom, I would still be 20 years behind.
What are some of the patents that you did? I mean, we were talking at dinner last night, and you told me something very casually, like, yeah, that's what everybody uses. And I'm just like, what did you do? Yeah.
So one of the ones that I really, really am proud of from a patent was this idea, and it's a lot more important today, is being able to organically process knowledge. So that means everybody has this problem of, when you're trying to solve a problem, when you're trying to fix something, you don't tend to write down everything as you go. And so everybody has to write postmortems when a problem happens. Hey, this is what it was. This is what we did to fix it. This is how we troubleshot it, this kind of stuff. Nobody has the time to do postmortems. So I wrote a patent so that as you do stuff, it's collecting what you're doing in the background, and then it records that as a run book, if you will. Hey, if this happens, do these things. And it captures that and turns it into automation. That was one of my first ones. I've got a nice plaque, It was very proud. One day my kid asked, he was asking about invention and whatnot. I'm like, come back here, let me show you. I pulled the plaque out, gave it to him. It has the diagrams of everything.
You mean your 11-year-old son that writes his own video game codes?
Yeah. Yes. So, I want to make sure everybody understands this out there. If you don't use AI, everybody is going to. And that includes my kids at school. They came to me and said, hey, Dad, I'd really like to write a video game. And I'm like, okay, what do you want it to do? And there's a little button that you could hit that is a mic. And you could just talk to the AI. So I showed my kid, he could just talk to it. He doesn't like to type, he doesn't like to write, but, chip off the old block, he likes to speak. And he just loves doing it and loves sharing. He'd create a video game, and then he'd email it to a friend of his at school, and then they would play it, and then he'd create a 2-player game so they could play it together. And there is plenty of opportunities to use this technology to do all kinds of things.
It's fascinating.
And a lot of people like to say, no, it's only good for this, or no, it's bad for that. It's a technology.
And I kind of feel like our generation, you and I are the same age, like we're kind of the worst and, above. We don't know what it is. We don't understand it. And I say we, I'm speaking for the audience, not necessarily for myself, because I use the daylights out of it, and so do you. But, and people are scared of it and don't know how to use it. But man, it's something that could make your life a lot easier, depending on what you do, right? And there's not an AI fix for everything, but I would surmise, based on my conversation and learning a lot from you, it's a tool, right? And it's got a lot of uses. There's some things it's great at, some things it's not, and we're going to dive into all that. But kind of just going back to, you helped invent or create something else. You were explaining to me, I don't know, it was one of the big phone companies, and
Yep.
it's the towers. Will you explain that a little bit? I thought that was fascinating.
So yeah, after the dot bomb, my company decided to reduce its size significantly overnight, if you guys all know what that means.
You mean they were doing that before AI?
Yeah. I mean, again, the internet boom was over. A lot of people are talking about the AI bubble. That was the internet bubble, right? And they went through and cut heads significantly. And I found myself without a job. Within the first week, I had 3 of my customers that I did for that job offer me retainers. So I started a services company while I was looking for jobs. And I found out that maybe it's better to take part-time work, 4 or 5 part-time work. And then after the first year, I ended up making more money doing contract work than I did full-time for the company and working half the hours. And it really light bulb moment, I was like, wow, I can actually make a living off this just being an independent, and worked out really well. Until we were trying to sell some software to Caterpillar. I told you about last night. And these good old boys in Illinois set me straight, and said, look, what you're trying to sell is not worth the money you're trying to sell it.
Yeah, and I think, if I remember it, you were selling some specific thing for, over what, $500 million or $500,000?
$500,000. And they said, look, would you buy that? And it hit me like, you know what? You got me. And so over that next week, which was Thanksgiving, on a dare, I wrote my first software. And I still have a recorded video of it. So I can remember my early roots of how ugly it was. But no, it really said, wait a second, I can do this. It really was that light bulb moment that I moved from a worker into a businessman. Right?
And you actually wrote software that Caterpillar ended up using, right?
Yeah, many different Fortune 500 companies internationally, from fiber optic companies in Norway, to mobile companies in Ireland, to financial planning companies in the United States, hedge funds in the United States, 2 out of the 3 largest mobile providers I've done work for, luckily. And so really high quality people to work with. And telecommunication companies are incredibly great to work with because they have the patience to understand that their problems are very complex and don't require fast movement. And that's kind of leads into that software was really the first type of AI. So artificial intelligence is probably the most generic term you could possibly say. It's like saying computer. Well, your iPhone's a computer, right? Artificial intelligence, if you just say, if this happens, do that, that's artificial intelligence. Now, there's way different types. But what I did back then was more of the if-else kind of decision-making software. And went really, really well. The problem that I had was I did not have any guidance. I didn't have anybody I could pick up the phone and call. LinkedIn didn't exist. You know, you couldn't find people who've been through that to talk to. It was very isolating. And I made a ton of mistakes. Bad hires. I've made bad partnerships. But looking back, it gave me a lot of experience and wisdom and understanding people. And that was really the key to my professional career growth, of understanding that it's not about the technology, it's the people.
Most supplements are built for guys who work out 3 times a week and want to look good at the beach. That's cool, but that's not who I built Hoplite for. Hoplite is built for people who run towards, operators, performers, people who choose the hard thing when everyone else opts out. 4 products: creatine, hydration, pre-workout, and a cognitive mushroom supplement that'll make you question why you ever settle for caffeine alone. Stack them or run them solo. We've got bundled options built around how you actually perform, not how a marketing team thinks you should. If that's you, go to hoplitenutrition.com and join the tribe. Get 15% off your first order. Hoplite, for those who run towards.
Yeah, and you know, I don't want to put all your business out there, but I mean, you built a company, built a software, and then sold that company for a very large amount to Oracle. And so the reason why I'm bringing all this up is I really want to set the table for our listeners to really understand the depth, because it's really hard. You know, I've spent a lot of time with you and we've talked a lot. And so it's, you know, it's really hard to get all of those conversations out on a camera, but I really want people to understand that I brought you here for a specific reason. I called you the 500-pound brain. And, you know, you know, just every time I've had a conversation with you, when I would get off the phone, I would literally take notes. I mean, like I would write down, and you know, it's simple things to you. I can tell it's like a part of your everyday vocabulary, the things we were talking about, the topics that you and I were constantly discussing. And I just would get off the phone and I'm just like, I need to write this down. And what did he say? He said this and that. And so, you know, I really want people to understand that you just have a depth of knowledge. We're not even going to tap into like, you know, a tenth of it today, but, you know, you obviously didn't teach me AI. I was pretty AI savvy, but once you and Chris started talking, and Chris and I talked quite a bit, you really opened my eyes to some capabilities. And, you know, you have a consulting company that you know, we're going to get into on the backside of it, but you planted that seed in me. And then I have another mentor, E, you know, was kind of talking about some of those things. And, you know, he showed me how to start coding some stuff. And that really opened my eyes to the capability of what artificial intelligence can really do. And it was wild. So I'd like to see if you could kind of explain, or how do you tell folks how to plant that seed in somebody? What do you say to the person who's decided this whole AI thing isn't for them?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. Most of the time I talk to businessmen, businesswomen, right? People who are trying to accomplish something that other people say are too impactful, right? I deal a lot of times with founders, you being one of them.
Yeah.
You know, usually solo founders who are trying to change the world in their own little slice. And I have a lot of kinship because I was that person. I'm still that person. But what it usually is all about is I only have so much time in the day. And good hygiene things are thrown out when you have 60-hour, 80-hour weeks, right? AI can really help in that regard. The second thing is that you don't know what you don't know.
Great point.
So, unfortunately, my career has had a lot of interaction with lawyers. And lawyers are incredibly specialized. So
And expensive.
and expensive. And you end up spending $2, $3, $4 grand each time you talk to one, just to find out that you need a more specialized one that you need to spend 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 grand on. And the latency is really the killer, because in business, you have a handshake agreement that you need to follow through on. Somebody is relying upon you. You know, I'm one of those people that the paperwork is less important than the handshake. So I go through, and when someone says, Shawn, I need a fix, you know, waiting 2, 3, 4 weeks to get through the train of different lawyers to help them is not appealing to me. So being able to go through and take the complete problem, all the data, feed it to AI and say, look, this is my problem. This is what I'm trying to understand. Give me a basic understanding of the problem. Now, do I listen to the AI and do everything that it says? No. I treat it like I would treat somebody who's consulting for me. If you pay money to get somebody's opinion, you have the right to say, I don't agree with you, and do something else. And a lot of people think that AI is the perfect answer to everything. No, it's an advisor. You should treat it. It doesn't own the company. You own the company. You decide the way you want it to go. You're living your life. So if you treat it as an advisor that you do not have to listen to, it makes it a lot easier to understand what it's trying to say. And more importantly, I use it and recommend people using it to just educate themselves before they walk in the door. So, you know, I don't know if you have this situation, but I know a lot of pretty ladies out there who have a tendency to go to places like a dealership.
Yeah, car dealership. That's exactly what I was going to say.
And they say, yeah, it's just making a noise. I don't know what it is. And unfortunately, we live in a world where there are people who are going to exploit that ignorance. Now, certainly that's an extreme example, but think of that in your own life, right? If you have that kind of ignorance walking into a professional agreement where the other side could exploit that, you know, this really reduces the risk and gives you an education so that when you walk in, you can meet the person as a peer.
Yeah, and that's a great point. I mean, even the woman example, and granted, there's some super smart women out there, but you know, my wife has a ton of strengths, but I would not want her to go buy a car by herself. And that same dealership thing, I mean, you talked about it yesterday when we were in the car about, you know, your parents. You can take a picture of the VIN of the car you want, or, you know, let's say you're a girl and you want to go buy a new Ford Bronco, but you don't know what they cost, and, you know, dealership has markups. You can do a ton of research using AI, very pinpointed and broad-based, to again, you know, arm yourself for that business deal. Or, you know, let's say there's a husband who's deployed and his wife wants to buy a new car and he doesn't have time to deal with it. You know, she can, you know, go make that transaction and probably have a way better outcome than going in there, to your point, right? Unarmed with business information that could really be detrimental. You know,
I mean, as we were talking about yesterday, blind spots is really what cripples founders, right? And they go in and I have a lot of affinity to founders because they have an addiction, right? They believe that they can change the world. They believe they have the tiger by the tail, and they usually do to a certain degree. But what they are missing is really what's going to kill them. And that's the blind spots that they're not prepared for, right? They walk in and say, okay, like, I don't know how many guys I've talked to out there that says, I have a great idea. I'm trying to build the software. And I'm like, wait a second. Who are you going to sell the software to? What do you mean? I'm like, look, man, revenue has to be at the end of the rainbow. He's like, well, I'll just get funding. I'm like, look, funding is going to ask you, the first question is, how are you going to get the money back? So, you know, asking those questions, being prepared so that when you have a business meeting with somebody that can make or break your career, that can make or break your future company, your product, is the difference between success and failure. And AI is a very cost-effective, basically free way of getting a second opinion. And I don't know how, good example, unfortunately, and I'm sure we'll get into it, AI is impacting a lot of jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Friends of mine calling me up, Shawn, what do I do? I'm like, well, you need to take your resume and go to the 4 major AI free models. Don't pay $1. Put your resume in there. Tell them what you're doing, what you're trying to do, and ask where the best opportunities are right now. And then focus on that. Take the four different opinions from the 4 different sources, and then construct your own strategy of getting a new job. And the feedback I've gotten from that strategy is, Shawn, that's great. You know, it said, hey, right now, healthcare is more of an opportunity than telecommunications. So I'm going to focus on that. And they've been more successful. It's not, again, I know I harp on this a lot. It is not the technology, it's the people. Who cares about what you use, right? Before, we used typewriters instead of computers, right? Before after laptops, I use my phone most of the time than anything else. You know, that is insignificant. It is what I use it for, and how I am successful with the technology is the only important thing.
Love that. Here's the split I see everywhere. Half the country thinks AI is the end of the freaking world, and the other half thinks it's some sort of con. You've said both camps have it wrong. What's the truth they should be holding instead?
AI is just another technology, man. I mean, again, a lot of people out there remember the internet, right? That first time that they went online, maybe they bought a book off Amazon. That was kind of my big moment. Maybe it was the first time you met an old acquaintance on Facebook. You know, those wow moments, you know, and then what did we get as a result? There was negative things, right? Unfortunately, those old acquaintances probably should have been old acquaintances, right? You know, how many people, you know, ran into ex-girlfriends online, right? There's negatives to every positive. And that is the same thing. And if you're blinded and says, hey, you know, social media is the devil, it's evil. Well, you know, what about all the old people who are getting to meet people they haven't talked to in generations, right? What about the value there? There's always pluses and minuses to technology because, and again, I'm just beating this horse, it's all the same. It's the people. It's never the technology. So,
which is funny because that conversation is solely focused, especially today in the last year. It's, you know, tech, but, you know, you and I have both come to find out, probably you more so than me, that like, you know, AI without a human, it has no, like, dude, it'll screw up everything if you don't, you know, keep an eye on it. And it's done it plenty of times for me.
Yeah, I mean, you can create AI to do human tasks. Well, guess what? You know, you remember the cotton gin?
Yeah.
It's not the first time that we've used technology to do labor, right? And it now certainly maybe it's easier, maybe the bar is lower, you know, but I would say that how many people truly enjoy their jobs, you know, of grabbing things like, you know, the loom. You know, a lot of people talk about making clothes. Back in the day, there was, unfortunately, mostly women were at home and all they had to do was sew all day long to make clothing, right? Now it's in manufacturing, right? This is the same kind of stuff. There's going to be roles that all of us had, most of them are ones that nobody wanted, and they have to go through. And those roles don't exist anymore because A, people didn't want to pay people to do it, but more importantly, people don't want to do it.
No.
You know, I had a great customer in Alaska and he said, Shawn, I'm dying because I can't hire anybody up here. I'm like, well, what's your problem? And he's like, do you know how hard it is to find a kid out of college, 22 years, who could pass a drug test, who wants to sit in front of a screen all day and wait for something to break? This was before AI. He's like, I can't hire people to do that job, and they have to be here. So there are all kind of regulations and whatnot that have roles that it's best to let automation do, not AI. AI allows you to build automation. Automation has been going on since the Industrial Revolution.
Before we dive deep into the weeds, give me two quick ones. One thing about AI, the average person flat doesn't believe that's true.
Wow. Most people believe that AI is going to evolve into an intelligent species. And I say this all the time. Large language models, what most people talk about as AI, is mathematics. It's statistics. It's not magic, right? If you have ever done what I have done, and you've picked up messaging and you're texting somebody and you say piece of, and it converts it to shut, you've just experienced what the current version of AI in its younger years.
Just autocorrect.
Autocorrect is what you're experiencing here. So let me demystify some of this. When you type in a question, you are effectively using the next generation autocorrect. It is guessing. Now, statistically, and if you want to look at scientists and whatnot, they'll give you all that kind of stuff. Most people see today, all the statisticians will tell you that when you ask a question, on average, you get an 85, 86% correct answer, right? And if you go in and you're talking to an expert in their field, talking to an expert in their field that maybe has an A+ rating, 95% correct, and that costs 10 grand to talk to that person, versus free and you could talk to somebody with a B+. As a business person, you need to accept certain levels of risk. I can wait 3 weeks, spend 10 grand to talk to somebody to get a 95% right answer, or I could talk to something immediately and get an 86% right answer. This is what the technology is. It has nothing to do currently with a new God, digital God being created. People like to talk about that because it's great for the media to push clicks. The bottom line is this is about mathematics.
What is one thing that people do believe about AI, but they're dead wrong?
They believe that it's going to replace all the jobs and that everybody is going to be unemployed.
Yeah.
Just looking from an economic perspective, that's impossible because then nobody can buy anything, right? What is most likely is there is going to be an incredible disruption, and there is an incredible disruption today around certain roles that automation can replace. Call center people, right?
You and I had this conversation last night. I had a very long conversation a couple days ago. Something was broke with one of our programs we're using. I'm talking to this person. This person is extremely detailed, is helping me solve the problem in real time. We end up solving it. But at some point, I'm like, I wonder if this is real. I even asked, like, hey, are you a real person? No, I'm an AI chatbot, but I'm still here to help you. And it gave this long diatribe. You're like, my God. And it's better than the help I would have gotten, 2 years ago from a call center. So,
and you got to look at it from this perspective. First and foremost, as a user, as a consumer, the best kind of conversation you could have about that barbecue is the guy who designed it, right? You would most likely get the best answer. They're not going to give you that guy, right? They're going to have him talk to somebody to write documentation, and they're going to give it to a third person, and that third person is going to try to help you.
Yeah.
So you have 2 degrees of separation from a good quality answer. So this has been going on for a very long time as far as the quality of support that you're going to get. But I told you yesterday about my experience, right? I live on a lake in Texas, and that lake, I have an irrigation pump that pulls the water out and uses it for my sprinkler system. I'm not an irrigation guy. I am definitely not a lake pump guy. First year, again, without AI, I had to winterize it. I asked my neighbor, followed his instructions. Guess what? I broke it, cost me a couple grand. Next year, I asked the irrigation guy who fixed it, hey, what do I do to fix this irrigation? I did what he told me to do, broke it again. Third year, I had AI. So I just went out there, took a picture of the lake pump, said, hey, how do I winterize this? It gave me a list step by step. I followed it. Didn't have a problem that year.
Yeah, that's great. My pellet smoker wasn't working recently. My wife had made something. We were all super hungry. We wanted to eat this thing. I couldn't get it to work. I hadn't used it in a while. I did the same thing, man. Took a bunch of pictures, unscrewed the area where I thought, I figured it was an electronic thing. Took pictures, had a 5-minute conversation, a back and forth, and that sucker was up and running, man. And, honestly, dude, I would have had to take that somewhere to get fixed or whatever. So there are some really cool things that AI can do.
Well, I mean, just look at the economic impact of those 2 examples, right? You and me are not using the company resources that we would have normally done to solve that problem. So those people's jobs were affected. And this reminds me of when I went and visited Nice in France. Walking down the street, there is dog dew all over the road. People will walk their dogs out every day. They don't pick up after their dogs. And I asked, because again, I'm a guy who asks questions. I'm the why guy. So I asked the owner of the cafe I was like, why do they do that? They said, why don't people just pick up after themselves? They said, well, then the 5 people whose jobs it is to come clean that up for the government, they can't do it. So if you pick up after your dog, you're losing those jobs.
You're like, well, somebody's not doing their job, dude, because there's crap everywhere.
Well, I mean, it is yet another example. There's jobs everywhere, but what would you rather do? Would you rather start your own company, solve a major problem, create customer delight, or pick up dog crap every day? Now, sometimes I'm sure there's business owners saying there's not much difference, Shawn, but there is, right? Can you imagine every day waking up and your job is just to clean up after rich people? What kind of mental feeling would you get from having a job like that?
But I mean, there are, man, there's a lot of people that either do jobs they don't like, but there's a lot of things that AI is not going to touch. Like you and I talked about it yesterday. The trades, man, electricity, plumbing, HVAC, carpenters, builders. Like there are some things. It's like, there's a massive shortage of electricians right now, and now companies are poaching, from other companies. They can't even find people, and we're going to talk about the data centers later. But close friend of mine, his son just got picked up by a data center, paying a ton of money. They poached him from somewhere else. And so, there are things too, especially for those of us that have kids, right? Like trying to figure out our kids' future and what they could want to do now that may not exist later. And so I think it's, great to have an intelligent conversation about what it is and what it's not. And I want to dive into kind of some things to just really kind of start at the beginning for folks who don't know anything about it. There's a lot of people out there that'll actually have heard about it, and maybe a lot of people that have used it, but maybe some people are afraid, don't even know how to use it. So I kind of want to start there, and then we'll progress from there.
Most supplements are built for guys who work out 3 times a week and want to look good at the beach. That's cool, but that's not who I build Hoplite for. Hoplite is built for people who run towards, operators, performers, people who choose the hard thing when everyone else opts out. 4 products: creatine, hydration, pre-workout, and a cognitive mushroom supplement that'll make you question why you ever settle for caffeine alone. Stack them or run them solo. We've got bundled options built around how you actually perform, not how a marketing team thinks you should. If that's you, go to hoplightnutrition.com and join the tribe. Get 15% off your first order. Hoplite, for those who run towards.
So the first main question is, define AI for somebody who has genuinely never typed a prompt in their life, one clean sentence, if that's possible. What is it? Actually, there's no way one sentence can work. So.
It's like Google search on steroids. Instead of it giving you links that you've got to hunt for the answer, it answers the question. I like to say it's your best friend that just knows everything, irritatingly, right? This is the reason why people hate AI, is because they're right more often than they are. Everybody has that friend. If you don't have that friend, you are that friend that, you get a call and says, hey man, I'm having this problem. What do you know? And, and for the most part, you and me network a lot. That's how we know each other.
Oh, yeah.
And again, if you're not networking with people in the age of AI, it is the number one skill beyond AI, right? If you don't know people, you're going to have a lot of trouble. But AI is that guy who is the Gemini fix-it, who will figure out your problem and give you the best answer. Now, the problem people have is, and you and me had this conversation, the number one issue people have with AI is that they expect AI to have the context to the question that you're about to ask. So I tell this problem is so pervasive with people with AI, and it is usually the number one cause of AI slop, is they ask a question without any context. So, hey, what does that mean, Shawn? Well, imagine, if you will, you roll up into a restaurant and you see, Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Meta, sitting there. And you walk up to him and you say, hey, when I'm using Messenger and you click on this, why does it do that? Well, the guy's going to be like, I have no idea what you're talking about, man. Yeah. I mean, and again, I'm guilty of this, just as much as my wife is. But how many times has my wife rolled up and asked me a question that she's been thinking about in her mind, and she's, 15, 20 minutes into a conversation she had in her mind, and then she asks me a question like I know what's been going in her mind. I do this too, right? We all have this problem. So, when you deal with AI, make sure that you set the table. You start at the beginning of the conversation, not at the middle of the conversation.
Yeah. And I guess, kind of what you're leaning into is prompting. I want to come back to the prompts here in just a second. So when somebody types a question into one of these AI things, Perplexity, ChatGPT, whatever, and an answer comes back 3 seconds later, what is actually happening in there? No math degree required.
Yeah. So the scientific term is called inference, which is yet another example of how the intelligentsia of Southern California like to separate themselves. It is just a fancy word of saying it's searching a database to give you an answer. Now, what a large language model, what ChatGPT uses, what the back end of it's called a large language model. And model is the key word. Think of it as like a database. So they took everything on the internet, and they took Wikipedia, they took Reddit, they took Meta Facebook messages. They took all of that and they put it in a single solitary database. And then when you ask it a question, it's going to break down your question into mathematical numbers that can then be searched in that database. And then the search results come out of that database. and then it converts it back into words and then tries to make sense of it for you. That is what it does. It is a database search.
And basically, I think you were kind of explaining it to me yesterday. It's like a triangulation where it takes the words and it triangulates with a couple things. It's basically kind of, it goes back to your thing you were saying earlier. It's more of like a statistical, mathematical probability type of thing. Can you explain kind of how that works and then kind of some of the dangers of what happens when you overtrust it?
To understand how this technology works, back in the 90s, some guy came up with a term, a transformer. I know. This is the problem with us Gen Xers. We're always trying to go back to our youth. But what it is this fancy way of taking a word and turning it into a numerical representation. A fancy way of saying a vector. Some of you all know what vectors are, right? And that is a directional course, right? But if you have a matrix of 3 vectors, you actually have a point in space. So the way the model works, it is a 3-dimensional array. And then if you take the word cat, it's going to create a point in that database that represents cat. And then if you do the same thing with kitten, a kitten is kind of close to a cat, right? It has a lot of the same attributes. And then if you do it again with a dog, well, a dog's still a pet, so maybe it's over here. But if you start saying house is way over there, right? So that when you start asking things, it's like a huge lasso that grabs all these words together, all this data together, and then pulls it all in and makes it a much easier conversation because you're grouping all that data together. And when you're talking about billions and billions and trillions of pieces of data, this is what the current models are based upon. And they're ever growing. When I tell people, hey, people ask, why do we get a good answer? Well, there's an old joke. The easiest way to get a fast answer on the internet before AI is to post the wrong answer to a question, because that will elicit somebody to post the right answer. Well, similarly, there's a theory that the most answered question, the most accurate answer is the one that everybody is saying the most. Now, you know this and I know this. Just because people say this is true doesn't make it true. And this is where we have that 15% of it may not be accurate, right? So the first problem that people have with AI getting poor answers is they're asking the question at the middle of the conversation, the end of the conversation, and never starting the conversation. We've all been there. I'm married. We've talked about that. But number 2 is the best you could get is a B+, because, just because everybody on the internet says it's true doesn't make it true.
Very great points. People treat AI like it's one thing. You've called it more of like a Swiss Army knife, a bunch of different tools. Pick the 3 blades a normal person would actually use and tell me what each one kind of represents in your head.
Yeah, I talked about the example, you and me both having this tech support thing. People say, Shawn, you're a 500-pound brain, right? No, I am in tech because tech breaks for me so often. I'm absolutely cursed. Everything is always breaking for me from a technology perspective. And I have been forced by God's grace to be the person who has to fix these things. I'd rather be fixing business problems than technical problems any day long, because I don't like arguing with the computer. You said wrestling with AI. It's not fun to wrestle with tech.
No.
I like to talk to people, right? People are interesting. People have experiences that are real, right? So, that's where I'd lean into first and foremost. And understanding that you could use this technology in your everyday to fix your problems and restore some sanity is the first level that I tell everybody. It is the easiest thing. They have commercials. Google has somebody trying to replace their toilet innards. You talk about the safest trades is plumbers. Well, I wouldn't be too sure about that. But I'll tell you one thing. Maybe doing easy jobs, AI is going to help you with, but that's just going to mean there's going to be a lot more harder jobs because there's going to be more toilets.
Yeah.
Right? When people are like, hey, I know I could do this, so, let's put another bathroom in the house, or I've got 6 bathrooms in my house. We have 4 people and a dog, So, when it comes down to very easy maintenance, yes, that's where AI can shine. The second area, and this is more, we talked about this the other day, that I found completely helpful, is we've all been in those situations where a provider of your service has failed you. Recently, you talked about me selling the company. My wife wanted to go to Australia, and we did the Great Barrier Reef. Beautiful. I recommend anybody who gets the opportunity. God graced me with the opportunity to go, so we went. However, the flight airline let me down, canceled Christmas Eve, left us in an airport, made so many mistakes. I came home after that vacation, frothing at the mouth, being let down. And I reached out, called them up, and what did they say? They said, oh, sorry, sir, there's nothing we can do. And I was so disappointed, I just turned to AI and says, okay, I want retribution. What can you do? Like, let's burn some bridges, man. And I went through and I said, you know what? I'm not going to spend time talking to people on the phone. Give me something I can do that's going to get me traction in 30 minutes or less. That was the question I asked. And it gave me, send an email, copy and paste, send an email out. I got 4 free round trip tickets, and an apology. I had my internet service provider made a whole bunch of mistakes. And what did it tell me? File a grievance in the FCC. Next day they called me. So,
but that was an interesting story. You had a fiber optic cable cut at your house, but there was like this lawsuit going on in the neighborhood. Whoever said company didn't want to come out and fix it. And so you did this like research project. And then that's when the AI told you to contact the FCC, and it like even told you who to email and all that stuff, right?
Yep. It said, copy and paste this into this website, right? And next day, there are neighbors in my neighborhood who'd be fighting with this provider for months trying to get their service restored. So, I don't want to say that it's your best friend, but when you have no recourse and you don't know what to do, it's incredibly helpful. And remember, I was an expert in this for years and never thought to use it for basic home, sanity type projects like this. And I would be the guy who has to be on the call, just waiting.
Yeah, and who of us done that, dude? You got to call somebody to get something fixed or a warranty repair or whatever, and it's like, please hold for 30 minutes, and you're just like, God, that's all this time in my life. You can't get back, man. I think something I've talked about a lot on this platform is the older I get, the more aware I've become of time, not money. Everybody's always put this emphasis on money. And look, man, we all need money to live. But people don't realize, man, the one thing that we are losing is time. And so I value like every second. Well, maybe not every second like I should have, but a lot, especially for those that have kids that are getting older and, you want to maximize that time, but you still have to go to work. And that's why I love AI. It's given me time to do things that I probably wouldn't have time to do. And this podcast started off as a real hobby for me. It was just like this fun thing I was doing in my retired life. And now it's become a thing where, you know, it pulls, that takes so much to run this platform that the average people, you know, you're a creator, so you know, but most people have no idea what it takes to do something, especially to the level that we're trying to do it. I've got a great editor and we work, man, sometimes I work 6-7 days a week, but now I'm able to work a lot smarter instead of just, you know, waste time. And I still battle my AI, right? And so I was laughing with you last night, like I created all these AI programs that are helping me, but sometimes I feel like I take a lot of that new free time to mess with the AI thing that I built. So there are 6 of these platforms that I'm aware of. There's probably more. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Grok, Copilot, Perplexity. Those are the ones that I'm aware of, and I'm sure there's others. They all kind of look identical to a normal person. Are they the same? If somebody could only pick one to start, which one and why?
I personally believe that for most people, they're pretty similar, right? You know, they have all these very expensive tests and statistics and scientists and saying who's who in the zoo. My perspective is the AI that you're most comfortable with is the one that you should use. I recommend everybody, when you start out, use multiple simultaneously, and you build your relationship based upon the accuracy of what you're doing and how easy it is for you to use, right? ChatGPT was certainly the first, you know, OpenAI. They have lost a significant amount of market traction because their UI, their capabilities, the products that they're offering.
UI? What is that?
User interface. So
Okay.
this is, again, how many times are you in there and you're clicking around like, where the, you know, I can't find this piece of garbage, you know, that's UI, right? When you can't figure it out, right? That isn't your, I have this conversation with my wonderful father at least once a week. He's like, I'm just not smart enough to use this. I'm like, no, they are too lazy to make it for people to use it. So never accept that the problem is you from a technology perspective. You are the human. You're what's important, right? Don't listen to those hoodie-wearing guys that you just need to use my UI my way, right? If it doesn't work for you, don't use it. Don't suffer. You know, you can go into AI and say, hey, I think this is trash. What are their competitors? And do what we do in America, which is vote with your money and go to someplace you do like. Now, I use Anthropic's Claude. I think from a UI perspective, from a capability perspective, it has let me down the least, right? I pay for Google. I think the speed of which it answers questions is really good. I really like it.
What's Google's AI program? Is that
Gemini.
Okay.
And they have a competitive advantage because of their back end. They are making their own hardware in this world. And so they're going to have a lot of competitive advantage in the future, Google will, for the cost of things. Now, a lot of people are worried about, hey, you know, at some point AI is going to cost too much for me. Well, I could tell you in my history, and if you remember, you know, what has been free in the past that eventually they had to charge you for, right? So, you know, if I go back to AOL days and those dial-up, right, I had to pay a fee, and then it went unlimited, and then it didn't work very well at all. And then, you know, it became good. You should expect that same type of situation, except now you can test drive all of these. And I recommend people do that. You know, identify a problem that you want solved, ask 2 or 3 of them, right? And then look at the 3 answers and say, okay, what makes sense to me, and make that decision. You're the human. You get to decide. That's the beauty of AI.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons I like Perplexity a lot, and I don't I'm not here. I'm not sponsored by any of these people, but I use Perplexity on my phone. My understanding of Perplexity is it pulls from all of the different AIs, and it kind of helps you. It does it internally to figure out, which one is better for the task that you're asking it to do. Now, the Perplexity has that computer model, which I think you have to pay for, but that computer model is nothing more than Claude Code. I mean, the Claude Codes I'm also a huge fan of.
Well, I tell everybody with AI, right now, you should be dating, not marrying. Because it is obvious the amount of money that they're spending, half of them are not going to exist in 5 years. And so, you need to be comfortable using a multitudes. But find the one you like. When she disappoints you, dump her. That's what I tell people. And, loyalty comes over time. And for me, Anthropic has been really, really good and really, really reliable. But I could tell you, I had a customer outage the other day where we needed to fix things, and they were down.
Yeah, Anthropic's had some issues lately. I don't know. Do you know anything about the Fable 5 or Fable when they released it and it hacked all the government websites? I don't remember exactly what happened. It was something that along. They compromised security.
It was called Mythos. That was the project code name, and then they released it as Fable. And what Fable is just a little bit smarter. So, I tell you about the context, right? Well, it was really, really good at figuring out its own context. The people that you could talk to, and you just have shorthand with them, right? You could start in the middle of a conversation, they could pick it up, right? We call them kindred spirits, right? We had some of those conversations yesterday. But what it was really good at is picking up that context. And so therefore it was more accurate. And what people were using it for is they could dump in an entire code base, let's say a web server's code, and say, give me the top 5 exploits. And it was smart enough to figure that out really quickly and be able to get an answer. So all this, remember I told you, back in the day, software engineering had ethics. It was all about the quality of the deliverables because you're making software for government, which went into Apache helicopters. And that was the difference between life and death. And then the quality of software has degraded to the point where there's all these bugs and security issues. And so now you have software that can analyze those and find really bad security vulnerabilities. And so the government rightfully was worried that foreign actors would use the software to find those vulnerabilities because banks use these open source web servers and databases, and they make them freely available to access online. And so that creates an attack surface for cybersecurity issues. And as you know, there are several countries in this world who do not like the United States of America.
Yeah. I want to talk, this is kind of a subtopic, but man, data centers, that's all we're hearing about. It's kind of this, data centers are going to steal all the water and the power, which I thought was an interesting conversation. I mean, you and I were talking yesterday, people are talking about how, data centers are going to mess with the ecosystem and the biosphere and, steal water, but people don't realize how much water it takes just to make a couple, things of almonds. And nobody seems to matter wasting millions of gallons on that. What are the data centers? Why are they building them? What's some of the myths and the realities of that?
As far as the environmental thing, I think it's really interesting because I remember growing up in Prattville, Alabama, going to high school, driving in my 76 Nova to school, and the stench of the paper mill. So when people tell me environmental impact, well, everything has an environmental impact. I could tell you data centers have a very small one in comparative. In fact, now they are forced to be able to use their own power to power data centers. So, yeah, data centers are being used for AI significantly. Number one, we talked about the inference word. That's what's going to take your query and encode it, search the database to get you the answer and return it back to you. So you need a lot of hardware to be able to do that in a fast way. This is not an easy thing. It requires a whole bunch of queries, breaking everything down. It's all parallel programming, right? When you put something in there, it slices and dices it into 100,000 different things and executes it simultaneously and then pulls it all together at the end to get you your answer. So that way it takes 2 or 3 seconds to get an answer instead of 2 or 3 years, right? And this is all powered by parallel hardware computing. This is where NVIDIA comes in. Everybody talks about NVIDIA, $4 trillion company now. Well, they were a video game card company 10 years ago that I said, who in the right mind would invest in something like that? That just shows you, you think I have a 500-pound brain. Guess what? If I would have put, $30,000, $40,000 into that stock, I'd be an investor right now. I would be helping founders. I'd be funding them.
Yeah.
Right. So, it comes down to that's a very important part. And the other part is you have the training side of this. So you need to take all of Wikipedia, all of Reddit, all of Facebook, doing Google searches and crawling every website on earth. And you got this huge petabytes, just unbelievable amounts of data that needs to be compiled into these models. And it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of hardware. And so, again, you have the inference side, you have the training side, and both of those require a lot of compute. This is why NVIDIA is a $4 trillion company.
Yeah. Yeah, and there seems like it's almost arms race, if you will, not only between companies in the US, but also, our foreign, China and Russia and some of these, these things. You told me something interesting about Chinese AI.
Mhm.
They don't have access to US chips, which my understanding is those chips are better. But they're still able to do some of that stuff cheaper.
Mhm.
What are they doing that's different than we are?
So, NVIDIA, like I said, was a video game manufacturer. They created video cards, right? Their biggest thing was crypto, right? Because crypto has the same parallel processing requirements. And they built a lot of chips for those. And those chips aren't as good. They've been beaten up by crypto for the last 5-10 years. So a lot of those crypto companies, they go through and they dump them on eBay. And on eBay, what happens? They're bought and then shipped over to China because China's allowed to have the 5-10 year generation from US. They're having difficulty getting the new latest ones that we have made today, which is actually funny because it's in the same time zone that they're made, but they can't access them. So
For now.
Yes. So it comes down to those chips are lower quality. And so, again, that old joke, life finds a way. They may be communist on paper, but they're capitalists at heart over there. And they need to find the solution. And their solution was to work smarter, not harder. And they had this idea of, we talked about having all the pieces of information in the world and having a model that's just huge. Now, the amount of duplication there. So I tell people what the Chinese teams figured out called DeepSeek. Imagine, if you will, you have a 70-year-old jiu-jitsu master who has all the scrapes and bruises and scars of matching up with every expert for 50 years. That is the model that has everything, right? All that wisdom. And then if you were to take a really high quality new jujitsu master and have the old master train the new one, the old master is not going to teach them every failing that they've had. They're going to teach them only what is successful. And this process is called distillation. So you end up with a newer model that has less size, but it has the same accuracy. And in the AI game, the smaller the model is, the faster it's going to answer things. And that means you can use lower hardware.
What about the thing that I'm concerned personally, especially here in America? What are they doing with all of our data, right? So obviously, to get on Grok, ChatGPT, Claude, you sign up for it. They have your data, especially if you're paying on a plan. They have all your information, but also they have all of your queries, your search engine, your prompts. Where is all that data being housed? Is it really private? That's a conversation I feel like nobody's really talking about.
Yeah, it's there. Again, part of, and we'll get to it, my point, one of the companies that I have, it's called Kinetic Tricks. It's for go-to-market. And one of the difficult things that salespeople have is I need to find out who is the person who's the decision maker. And that information and accessing who is in the internet. So number one is everybody has a career. I mean, it's a thing that a lot of people don't understand is, the person you're trying to talk to is a human being who has family, who has a career, who have their own ambitions. And they are going to put themselves out to the world. They're going to have a LinkedIn page. They're going to have a personal blog page. They're going to engage in social media because it's what's best for their career. So they're going to expose their lives to a certain degree online. And as soon as you put it online, it's available in Google search. If you're available in Google search, you're going to be in these large language models. Now, unfortunately, there's things beyond that. I could tell you in the very early days, people were like, well, Shawn, are you worried that they have proprietary information in here? I'm like, they do. Pull up the AI and say, give me the last word in the 50th page of The Hobbit, the book The Hobbit. And it goes, here you go. The entire everything is in there. They put everything. And it is shocking what kind of data is in there. So privacy is always a problem. It was a problem before AI. This is why so many companies would give you access to scrub it of Google and whatnot. That same kind of stuff is really not available for large language models, especially the open source ones that they don't care about because it's done overseas.
Set the business stuff aside for a minute. In a normal house, not a tech house, how is AI already in people's daily lives without them even knowing it?
No. I mean, you mentioned it earlier, calling up tech support. It's going to be AI. If you don't use it, they're going to use it. The other part, as I said, all your online information is being used by AI. Your persona is being generated by everybody you do business with. So they're going to use it. The media that you consume, I don't think you could find a prominent YouTuber who does not use AI for graphical, image generation, right? So I don't know about you, but back in the day, I was really intimidated with a lot of the stuff because you had to pay for a graphic designer. You had to pay a lot of money. These people were artists. They were not business people usually, so you would go through multiple iterations to get a logo. If you wanted a logo for your site, it would take 2-3 weeks and a couple grand. And you ended up with something that you probably didn't like, that you just had to go with. Now, for free, you could go through and say, hey, this is my business. This is what I'm trying to do. Give me 50 logo examples. Blah, 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 blah. You get to pick whatever you want.
Yeah, just the image generation capabilities in the last 6 months to a year has been unreal to where it is today. I mean,
and then here's the funny thing is the people I know who graphic designers, they're completely overwhelmed with work right now. There's not less opportunity, there's more, because instead of focusing on the boring create logo stuff, they're being asked to do things that AI can't do and specialize, and they get paid more because of that.
yeah.
So that's just yet another example where there's a lot of confusion that AI is going to destroy jobs. What it's going to do, it's going to open the door for a lot harder things that people have to do. And all the easy stuff, you're not going to get paid to do easy anymore.
No, that's a great point. Here's something I find super interesting, and I think I've alluded to it already a couple times, but people are using AI more and more, but they're trusting it, less than ever, kind of at the same time. What's going on there?
Well, I mean, for one is, a lot of people are starting to get impacted by AI. And you get a certain situation where, like, I've got friends that have been impacted and are unemployed right now. And some of them are like ready for the next adventure. Let's go tackle it, right? The resilient people. And then there's some people who are like, I like that work. I wanted to do that work forever. And now it took something from me, right? And I'm very sympathetic, I've been one of those guys where, a lot has been taken from me. So I'm kind of like, well, this is just life. Life is about loss. I'm sorry if you haven't realized that. God bless you. You haven't experienced loss. You're one of the lucky ones. But that's just how things are. So, that's where I land.
Yeah, we were talking about this too. I have a hard time understanding people that just refuse to evolve, right? Like as a species, we've had to evolve, whether it's people that live in cold climates, animals have had to evolve based on change. Like I don't understand. I have a hard time understanding or, dealing with people that just refuse to evolve. Like I used to do this thing and that thing's not available and I love that thing. And it's like, well, cool, man. You just give up. You're just done. Like, you know what I mean? Like I think that whole, resiliency, I guess, if you will. Cause I do think there's a lot of people freaking out, it seems like it's a lot of pandemonium, but nobody really wants to find the next thing. And I think, I'm a person that loves to learn. I also ask a lot of questions, but, I do kind of empathize with people that maybe don't have that inner drive because we're not all built that way. So it is, it's definitely an interesting time to be alive. I think in some aspects it's super cool. Science is changing, biohacking, technology's flying, man. I mean, I used to be a guy that kind of keep up with tech. Now it's damn near, it seems like it's impossible because, you get to learn something, and then a month later that thing's completely changed and you're like, you're constantly, I kind of feel like I just have to just open my aperture and take it all in and kind of, and it's easy for those of us that have ADD too, is to chase the thing and then that thing changes and you chase. And so sometimes there's weeks, sometimes I feel like I'm spinning in a circle. I'm like, man, did I accomplish anything? Did I accomplish the tasks outside of what our main everyday thing is as I'm trying to learn new things? Because it can almost be overwhelming.
Oh, it is overwhelming. And that's another reason why people are having an issue with AI, because it is evolving monthly.
Yeah.
That something new is coming out. Something, somebody tried something. Again, the trillions of dollars being pumped into this concept worldwide. I'll be honest, it's a bubble, right? The question is what happens? We're building it up. We're pumping a lot of money into it. It's pretty obvious that the media's point where, hey, AI is going to replace humans, that is turning out to be false.
Okay.
I've been talking about this for 5 years that this has been going on. You could look at my podcast. I've been consistent about this. And now, these the CEOs of these companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, they're coming out and saying, you know what? It's actually creating more jobs, because what the value curve is changing. We need people who are going to use AI to tackle these problems in bunches, right? Instead of just doing singular. We talked about it in healthcare. There are hundreds of thousands of drugs that are completely safe and have been verified for use by humans and have an incredible amounts of data. There are hundreds of thousands of conditions that humans are experiencing, and those symptoms that are just edge cases, people can't figure out what to do for them. And then AI has this innate ability to take those data sets, smash them together and say, hey, you may want to try this for that, right? And it is for just number crunching of data. It's incredibly useful. Do you really want to be the person who wants to research 100,000 drugs and 100,000 very edge case diseases and conditions and try to figure that out? It'll drive you mad. But AI, you could just crunch it and then, hey, let's give this a try. Now,
or how about this? I mean, my wife had to go to the ER last year for something. We had a scare. We couldn't figure out what it was, and stayed the night in the ER. Get released, as many of us have done through America, where you leave the ER, you have no answers. Like, I have no idea what just happened. I had this incident, this sickness, this injury, whatever, and they just cut you loose because they don't know either, really. Well, I was able to take all of her ER documentation, blood work, all these different things, created a very lengthy prompt, right? I gave it the context. She's had some medical history, and it spit out this whole thing. And we were able to chase that thing, and it ended up being, in this case, it ended up being right. And it helped the doctor that we went to, like, oh my God, it was a liver thing. And she just had some off balances. But if not, man, we would have gone all over the place. And, we had referrals to 3 different specialists because they didn't know. And, of course, the ER it's not a waiting place. They're there to treat you. You're either going to die, you're not. We're going to admit you, or we're sending you home. But a lot of people leave an emergency room, like, with no answers. And then when you're sick or something like that, that can really affect you. And so it was really cool. That was one small instance where we got a success. Now, look, I'm not saying don't ever go to a doctor and, trust AI. Good luck. I think go back to that meme that I said earlier.
Good luck.
Yeah, but it can help you because it is called the practice of medicine. A lot of doctors are really well-intentioned. They don't know. I mean, there's not, they can't see inside of you, or
they can't. You got to look at it from the doctor's perspective.
Yeah.
Do they really have the time and attention and fortitude? They see 10 people a day to read through the last 5 years of history to give you some kind of guidance. So,
and a lot of times, like some of the things, like I've had friends, because I have somewhat of a medical background, working in the medical field for a short period of time. Sometimes the context, to your point, right? This is an AI as well as a medical issue, right? If you go to a doctor and you see them and you don't give them the context of your last, sometimes you can't always do this, but if you have this compounding problem you've had for quite a while and you go see a new doctor, but you don't give them the context of everything you've done, all the different works that you've had, what's worked, what's not, and you're expecting that doctor to start with scratch, and you're like, hey, I can't, whatever. I can't go to the bathroom. But you don't give them the context of everything else that's going on. Well, they're going to start problem solving the way they were trained, and they're going to start at this one problem. They're going to focus on everything else that you have going on. So, the medical field, as to AI, it's all about context. And I think when you give that context, you get a better result. Like if you go to a doctor, and we've had some complex medical problems in our house. And so, when I go to the doctor and I provide that full context, man, it saves you so much time, saves the doctor's time. You get a better outcome. And I think that's a great way to kind of highlight how AI can be helpful as well. I think the more context you give it, its job, in my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it's to crush data, right? You're giving it this data problem, whether it's a business problem, a personal problem, you need something fixed. The more you get it.
Your leg pump can't be winterized,
Yeah,
So
perfect.
but I want to push on one of those things because I have had my own medical problems, right? And I come very well educated, and I bring the context, give the context to the doctor. 50% of the time, I have the same situation that you did, right? But the other 50% of the time, there is a lot of angst out there. There's a lot of distrust. And, I've had doctors who I handed that information in, they just threw it to the side. Didn't even look at the context. They wanted to start from scratch. And then, what I found out is the doctors who disregard data are the ones that you probably shouldn't be listening to.
Amen.
And again, I'm sorry that we're in this world that, you're paying experts, and some of those experts are more important, see themselves as more important as the people giving them money. But that happened before AI. It's going to happen after AI.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what I tell people is it is a tool, right? It is not something to be relied upon. You come to the table educated, you come to the table prepared, and you should have a better outcome, but it doesn't guarantee it. And, sometimes, what you walk away from isn't that AI is the great answer, is that, the humans that you rely upon are the more important answer. Because AI is not going to give you a prescription. AI is not going to carve you up. I went to the ER, as you stated, and, they said, this is your problem. AI told me it was a different problem. And, they did the work, and the work found out that AI was right. Right. And so, it added a 40-minute delay, but in the grand scheme of things, that's nothing.
Yeah.
The right diagnosis happened, the right work needed to be done, and I was healed.
Well, and that kind of brings up, you told me something yesterday I wasn't aware of, but a lot of the people that originally got involved and invested and started building AI, they were seeking longevity. Will you speak to that a little bit?
So again, it's one of these things that you hear in the media all the time, AGI, artificial general intelligence, otherwise known as the digital god. I would like to think that is hype. But I do know there is a concerted effort in Southern California around longevity, and that, if you have all the knowledge of the world, you can make sure that from a health perspective, you make all the right answers, and that you can maximize your life curve, not just from a duration perspective, but from a general welfare. And, yes, that is an aspect of this technology of why people originally invested in it, because they want to be able to ask the question like, hey, if I, here's all my medical information. I want to have, a perfect life. How can I maximize that perfect life? And it'll tell you, take these supplements, take these, do these tests and whatnot. And, it will answer those questions, and it will answer those questions immediately. Does that mean that because they have the money, they're not going to do the blood test every month, or they're not going to see the expert every 3 months? Or of course they're going to. But the idea is you could run these tests every day right? And you can do things, do micro adjustments in your life to maximize the outcomes. And, they're doing it for that. I'm using it for business. My wife uses it to answer thank you letters, right? This is a tool that can be used several different ways. Think of it like the internet. Some people used it in the beginning for email. Some people used it to buy books they couldn't find in their bookstores. And look what happened as the result. Now we have situations where people are doing social media, bullying kids online. That's one of the negative impacts of that technology. Is it the technology or is it the people that use it?
Yeah, another interesting conversation. You've done a ton of consulting for Fortune 100 companies and everything in between. You have this the three things, I think if I remember right, it was people, processes, and technology. And so, as in my biased mind of you being an engineer, I figured you solely focused on technology. But the conversation you and I had yesterday is you really focus on the people. Explain that.
Technology's fixed. They're going to give you what you're going to get. It does what it does. It won't do more, right? Technology is the easiest part, right? When you have a group of people with a common mission, right? Mission is just another way for process. But if people aren't following the mission, what happens, right? You're rowing in 10 different directions, the boat that's going nowhere. So you need to attack the people side of things first. And this is why you asked me, I think it was yesterday, say, okay, Shawn, who is the most successful using AI in corporate America? And I said, none.
Oh.
Why? Because it isn't the technology. The most successful people using AI are individuals and solar entrepreneurs because they don't have a people problem, right? They can maximize the value they're getting out of AI. Corporate America has to get on the same page first. And I mean, again, you did a lot of government work. I've done a lot of government work. I've done a lot of corporation work. You have divided loyalties. You have situations where you have fiefdoms, right? You have where my individual success is more important than my direct report or my boss or the company's success. You have divided loyalties. And that all causes problems in this. A lot of people aren't incentivized to do the behavior needed to be successful. This existed way before AI, and this is what's impacting it. So, when people say, hey, let's just spend a lot of money on tokens, and they're not getting any value from it, they're going to get impacted.
Hey, one quick ask before we dive in. Month after month, 95% of the people who watch our content aren't even subscribed to the YouTube channel. If that's you, you can seriously help us out today by just subscribing. It costs nothing. It takes 2 seconds, and it can make a huge impact on everything we're building here. There's no podcasting agency behind us. We have no corporate backing. It's just me, a small team, and an audience that really cares. Subscribing is the simplest way to tell the algorithm that this content is worth spreading. And it's the simplest way to support the mission directly. So hit the button and join the community. We appreciate all of you. Now let's get to this podcast.
Well, that goes back to that human slash, not everybody's going to lose their job. I was just reading, for folks that use Claude code and even some of these things, especially on a business corporate level. So, businesses are getting AI for their whole company to use, but it's a tokenization and you only get so many. And there was wasn't there something recently where a company spent an ungodly amount of money because they didn't cap it or weren't paying attention to it. And, so I've been reading a lot lately that a lot of these companies are, looking at hiring back some of the people they're getting rid of because AI is actually costing them more than what their employees used to cost. Is there any truth to that?
Absolutely. I mean, for the most part, the cuts that I've seen have nothing to do with AI. It has everything to do with poor management. Bets were made, bets were lost. And again, in a lot of situations, you can't increase the costs of the services you give to customers because they're not going to pay. So then you have a demand problem. So you have a whole bunch of bad debt that can't be serviced because the costs went up. I mean, I don't know if you guys have realized this, but inflation has been a problem these last 5 years. And for individuals, it's hitting, but it's also impacting corporate America too, because they've got costs that have gone up. They've got debts that need to be serviced. So if they can't get more income, which a lot of them are so big, they can't increase their incomes, and they can't just charge more money. So what happens is, okay, you have 3 options. One, you can go to the bank and say, hey, be nice to me and change how much money I owe you or how much I have to pay to you. I don't know if you talked to a bank recently. They're not the warm and fuzzy kind of people, right? You can go, the second one, you can go to your customers and say, hey, inflation went up 50% in the last 5 years. We're going to charge you more money. Is that okay? They've got their own problems, right? So the third option is I need to cut costs. And what do people do? They take the best and the brightest and the most expensive people and they say, sorry, we got to let you go. And so this is why right now there are so many high quality, excellent people who are out of jobs because they were the most expensive and they were the easiest ones to cut.
Do you think those corporations are going to feel that here in the coming year?
They are already feeling it, and they're trying to rehire people because, it was a bad move.
Well, I mean, I think too, when you first, and this is great for people to listen to too. When you first start messing with AI, if you're new, it's like finding a genie with a magic carpet. But then as you dive into it and you start using it for more complex problems, if you don't babysit it and you don't watch it and you trust it blindly, oh, good luck, dude. It'll destroy you. It'll cost you. I remember when I first started using AI a couple of years ago, hey, what are the best XYZ to buy whatever? And it spits out this thing. You're like, oh, it's already, and you buy that thing. And then you realize, I can't tell you, early on, I bought a couple programs because the AI had recommended it and I didn't strongman it and tell it to research and ask the right questions. And then I bought these programs and they were useless for what I needed because, again, I didn't provide the context of how I was going to use it, why it was important. So, I would tell you guys, be cautious with AI if you're new to it and you're getting into it and you're using it for whatever whatever program, is to make sure that you're asking this thing to fully research it and ask you questions and how are you going to use it, because you will waste a bunch of money and you'll blame the AI that it gave you the wrong thing. But, I think, if the one thing I've learned from you is that people are misusing it, myself included, because they don't understand what its capabilities are and how it really works, which is really why I wanted to design this conversation to begin with. We had an interesting conversation. Actually, every conversation I have with you is interesting, but one that I found almost funny and very interesting. Half of my friends and I that use AI, dude, I threaten my AI. I talk trash to my AI. You told me that that's not random. There's a reason people are hostile to it. What's actually going on when a grown adult is mean to the chatbot, and kind of explain your thesis behind this.
We're both Gen Xers, latchkey kids. We see things similarly. But it comes down to a lot of people see the AI as the enemy. They see it as tires they need to kick.
Or old Chris Tudis would call it your digital slave.
Yes. I mean, they see it as a worker bee, right? And unfortunately, we live in a society where people treat humans that way too, that work for them. And that's not how I manage people. That's not how and that's what I see. That's how I treat the AI, is it is an employee of mine. And that employee is capable, but ignorant, right? It doesn't know what I want. It doesn't know what I'm trying to do. It doesn't know the mission, right? So I need to make sure it is up to me, not the AI, to make sure it is doing what I want, right? I need to tell it, look, if you aren't sure, ask me questions, right? I typically at the end of every prompt say, ask me any questions for clarity. So that means if I do a poor job explaining of what it needs to do, it will stop and come back to me and ask. Number 2 is I don't know what I don't know. So I typically put in there and say, fill in any blanks with best practices. Any gaps that you see, like use what you recommend other people would do in that situation, and we'll roll with that to start with. And then lastly, I say, I am a fallible person, right? If you see a false assumption, a bad assumption, push back on it. What people don't understand is they create these chatbots and orient them in a position like there's a gun to its head and say, look, if you piss off the person who's asking this question, I'm going to pull the trigger. So when you ask things, that bot is going to try, it will lie to you to make you happy. If you ask it to do something it doesn't know how to do, and you don't give it the flexibility to push back, it's just going to randomly try to lie most convincingly.
Oh, and I've seen it over and over and over and over and over again. Oh.
And if you understand what the people who built it, that it is subservient to you and has to make you happy first and foremost, it makes things a lot easier to understand how to relieve that pressure and say, look, I don't want you to lie to me. And it will provide you a better outcome. Now, for me, I would have designed the system with the outcome in mind. But that's not who made the system, and that's not what they made it for. They want the person to use it to feel happy, right? It's an emotional, not a business response that they're trying to do. They want that wow factor. And I understand it. I think the best part about engineering is delivering that customer delight. But you never, ever, ever lie to the person that you're getting a check from.
Yeah.
And why? Because my parents gave me one name. This is the only name I've ever had. This is the only name I'll ever have. And I want that name, no matter who says it, they're saying he had integrity, right? AI has no integrity, none. And
do you think that's a flaw that they built on purpose, or was it accidental, or it's very interesting?
I think it's reflective of the people who built it.
Very powerful.
Unfortunately, we've all seen, people who are VC funded, right? Venture capital, to the tune of billions, trillions of dollars. Their job is to elicit a response, not from the customer, but from the people who actually gave them the checks. There's the joke of, if you're not paying for the service, you're the product. Applies here.
Let's talk about kids for a second, because this is the one I think that scares some parents. Kind of somewhat, I fall into this category at certain aspects. What are you actually seeing with how young people are using it, and what do you guys do in your own house?
I'm one of the weird people who believe that, there's certain technology that kids are not equipped to handle yet.
Amen.
I'm of the opinion of, not having kids on your YouTube channel, not allowing them social media until they're capable of doing it. Every technology has a price. The question is the value worth the price? And for my kids, they, as every kids are, is, Dad, what do you do? And it's really hard to explain business consulting to children. And I say, I help people make things. I'm like, well, what do you make? And then, we talk about software, and they wanted to see software and play with software and create things. And, I We do lots of projects, me and the kids together, always supervised, showing them how to do things. And then, the kids are going to go the direction that they want. This is the thing that really surprised me and really made my life so much better. I always wanted kids, but then when I had them, I'm like, man, this is the best stuff ever, right? Nobody really can convey to you how important and how fulfilling they could be. But you can't control them. They're going to go their way.
Can try.
And, you could try your best to control them, and then they're just going to lie to you. So the best thing to do is be a passenger in their car. And that's what I do, is like, what do you want to do today? What do you want to try to accomplish? Help instill the mission in my kids and have them decide what their mission is, and then I try to steer them into a positive way. And, my eldest is like, I really want to, I want to write a video game. I'm like, okay, great. Let's talk about it. I sit down, and of course I treat the kid like I treat customers of mine. Okay, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? What excites you? And, get them to talk. As they talk, write it down as context, right? Every word that comes out of your mouth is important because you said it. Collect all that information. I helped him write a 8-page treatise on the game that he wanted to write. And then I showed him how to load it in and ask questions and build it and iterate. So he's using Gemini. Google is a very safe AI, especially in kid mode, right? There are kid modes for these, right? He has Gemini from his Google Workspace account at school. So he is getting these tools, and they're curated and monitored by the school. Actually, Google does it for them, but, and he's iterating and iterating, and, he's creating games and he's sharing them with his friends, and then he creates 2-player versions so that they can come out over and do that. But to be honest, I'm the guy who's like, sorry, you get an hour of tech a day.
Oh, same, dude.
And trust me, he is a very smart, both my kids are incredibly smart, and they know how to play games. Like, I don't know what happened. I didn't use it all day and now it says an hour. I'm like, yeah, but it comes down to, I am very fortunate in my position that I can help my kids grow in any direction they want, and I'm going to support them in everything that they need. But I'm also going to encourage, like they're at camp right now, and that camp has no tech for 2 weeks. That is very important to me because I think that's going to be very important to them.
Yeah.
That they understand there's a world without tech, that tech is an option. It's a bonus. It isn't required.
Yeah, and we've heard the rumors of some of these, Silicon Valley millionaires and billionaires. I mean, they purposely send their kids to schools where there's physical textbooks, and they're not. I mean, because the technology thing, again, we're having a conversation about technology, and I think there's a lot of cool aspects of it. There is a lot of analog things that are being taken away that I worry about what that looks like in the future. My kids, their school, they don't have textbooks. Everything's on the computer, but they've had a bunch of days where the friggin' internet goes out at the school, and the school can't do anything. And they just hand out worksheets and nobody's learning. So it's definitely very interesting. And I don't know what the right answer is, but there is a fear that we're outsourcing being human, that a kid who talks to a machine all day stops learning how to be lonely, bored, in a room with a real person. Do you think that fear is earned, or is it overblown?
Oh, it is earned then some. Again, the role of a parent in my belief system is to guide them to a better life, right? And to me, diversity is the most important part of that guidance. They need to be able to touch and feel. I know they love what they love, and they're going to do that, and I don't need to encourage them to do the things they love. My job is to round them out so that, my eldest, he's like, I want to go to MIT, Dad, and I want to I want to build robots. Okay, great. I'm like, okay, you do understand you need to have some kind of physical sport in your, when you submit to MIT. You need to be a well-rounded individual. They don't take people who don't have any history education, right? You need to walk in there as a full 360-degree type of education before they will take you. And that includes all the things you don't like doing. And again, this is something that I struggle with. I'm sure all of us struggle with, is we don't like to do the things that we don't like to do. And, I call it adulting.
Yeah.
Adulting sucks. Tuesday I'm going to the dentist. Sucks, right? But we all as adults know that we want to minimize that part of our life and maximize the love, the living side of life. And AI can help us. I could tell you, I think education is going to be seismically changed by AI, to the point where the way that the education system is today is going to look like nothing in the next 10
I see
years.
that. I mean, kids already know how to cheat, right? It's a conversation we've had in our own house. They can cheat on their homework, and you talk about the Google firewall, but I laugh because my kids are often telling me how the kids in school can hack the firewall to watch all these programs are supposed to be banned. They're hacking the firewall, watching Netflix during school. They're ChatGPTing. I'm not saying that the schools out there are letting kids run wild, but these kids are smart and they're figuring out how to harness this technology and cheat. And so, besides the moral issue in and of itself, cheating, there's also that thing that they're not really learning. And so what is that going to look like in 5 to 10 years when we've had this there's that joke of the doctors graduating med school with the C degree and they ChatGPT'd everything their way through med school. Is like that the doctor that you want working on you? And it is an interesting time. And there is that voice, right, of people saying AI is making us dumber. I think I've actually said that to my own kids. The brain's a muscle. You stop using it, it shrinks. Do you really think AI is making us dumber? Or, what's your take on that? I know we're talking about a lot of the positives, but I am curious of somebody with your intellectual background that's used this probably more than most.
Yeah. Well, again, for the lazy people, AI is going to make you lazier. For the power users, it's going to make you more powerful. Now, you see the plethora of AI slop out there, you could tell what the higher percentage of which is. Right? So, I could tell you a lot of people are going to try to take advantage. But that's every tech. Again, I remember the internet being a thing while going to college, and that we could buy online anonymously, or there were users groups where people would post their previous tests from professors, and you could see the last years of tests. And is that cheating? I call it, yeah. Did I do it? Yeah. I ended up with a 2.54, man. You're not talking to the guy who had a 4.0, right? To me, education is something that is about learning how you learn. That's the most important thing that you can have your kids learn, is how do they get from a point where I don't know to I do know. Because if you can enable them to flip that switch themselves, they're going to the moon, man. If they don't know how to learn, they're going to struggle. They do know how to learn, but they need help. Then you have guidance for the person who's going to help them. And so I can't emphasize this enough, like understanding how your kid can take and develop a new skill is the most important development that you can have with your kids. And this is just my opinion. I'm not an expert, but to me, I was very lucky that I was brought in the gifted program in 7th grade, and they taught me how to speed read. It is a skill that I use that impresses everybody. I learned it in 7th grade, public education. They taught me a skill. That's what education should be about. And a lot of times, at least from my experience of what they're teaching my kids in public education, there's a lot of iteration. It is iteration. It is iteration. They're hoping that the kids are magically going to absorb the information, where I think it's better to have kids learn skills so they could be self-reliant.
Great point. I want to touch on a couple more things on privacy. Walk me through what these systems actually know about a regular person. Not the paranoid version, but the real version. Well, I mean, like we're using AI, like you as the human, all across the world. But let's take America. Like everybody's using it in a different form or fashion. And I think I hinted at it earlier. Like that leaves some sort of footprint. So what does AI? What are these systems? What do they really know about us? Like, do they know everything? Is there nothing? Is there no firewalls? Let's take our, because they are building personas on us. You've already alluded to that, right? So they know based on what you face forward publicly, your social media, whatever's commercially available. But there's also, these companies that sell your data and sell your search history and sell. So, I mean, are they really building that kind of persona? And if so, who is it? Is it everybody? Like, I still don't totally understand the bigger picture on how data works. I'm not an idiot. I understand the data centers and it all has to be housed, but there is this like big overarching, like, does OpenAI talk to Grok? Does Grok talk to Perplexity? Does Perplexity talk to Anthropic? Are they all sharing the same internet subset database? Like, that's what I'm most curious about.
No, basically, for the most part, the data that you send it is discarded and thrown away, unless there's a reason to keep it. And so, is there an issue? Possibly, most likely not. But I'll give you an example. I was always worried about privacy of the data I have. And, I have a Gmail account. And I'm like, I wonder what they're using the data for and that whatnot. But, my day-to-day and what I use email and what I use AI for is not, I don't participate in any criminal activities.
Sure.
I'm not doing anything that is billions and billions of dollars in transactions and whatnot. But I do know that, and this was famous a couple months ago, a famous person who died in a jail cell. He had all of his information released publicly, and it was a Gmail account. So literally, Google had access to all this illicit material that's going on that is rocking nations and people who've had political careers.
But did he really kill himself?
For decades, right? And technically, Google had access to all of this information and had every capability of using it. Now, I've been around in Fortune 500 world and in tech for over 25 years. There's two options. One, it is they are monitoring everything and they're getting reports of everything that's important and whatnot. Or they're so big and there's so much data, there's no way anybody could make heads or tails out of it. And I know which one I vote on, but I can't guess to the possibility that they have stuff that is going to use that. So I tell everybody, you can, when you sign agreements with these and you're paying them money, there are options to click privacy, and then they are contractually obligated not to use your data. You could do that. But that is just a piece of paper. Are they really doing it? how much do you actually trust your provider? I know from my personal experience, if you do, it's not a good bet. So, number one, if you're going to commit any crimes, you should probably not use these tools.
Well, and I think we're getting to the point where we're going to see like the Minority Report, type thing where, people are going to start using AI for nefarious, and they're going to have some people show up at your door. And there is a program in place. It's kind of already there. I don't know how robust it is in the AI world. I haven't talked to those folks in a while, but I would imagine that's coming soon too. So if you're going to use that stuff for illegal, nefarious, and I will tell you that AI has gotten better. I tried to do something jokingly yesterday with AI where I was taking a picture of something that happened recently in the news and wanted to put my friend's face over that dude's picture, as a joke. AI wouldn't do it. Said, nope, I won't. I actually got into I'm like, hey man, this is just a joke. And it refused to do it. It wouldn't do it. So I do see that they are putting, parameters in place for certain things. And it looks like that some of the AI is detecting, some of that. I don't know.
I mean, we were talking the other day about content creation, and there's a company called Cdance that will create AI videos. And people are like, wow, is it useful? I'm like, I don't know. I mean, I took my image, my professional headshot that I use for all of my professional screens, and I said, okay, make me dance river dance. And it had me for 2.5 minutes river dancing. I had the video. And for those of you who don't know me, I am like the worst possible dancer ever. Like nobody ever wants me on the dance floor. So I sent it over to my mom, and she's like, wow, did you learn how to do that? So like, yes, this whole fake AI images and videos is just going to get bigger and bigger. And this is why I tell people retail selling, knowing people, having a network, I know he's real because I've shook his hand, right? That's what's important. Buying from people you don't know, and contracting people over the internet is going to be far too scary in the future because it's just going to be so easy to fake people out.
Oh yeah, and that's already happening now. Before AI, Facebook Marketplace and some of these other sites where people are either getting robbed or duped or I've been hit twice, man. I bought some sod on the internet on Facebook Marketplace. It was too good of a deal to be true, which I should have known better. They used a stolen credit card, got it here locally. I remember the sod company was dropping it off in my yard or in my front. I was going to pick my kids up. By the time I came back, they were literally picking it up, putting it back on the truck. And I was like, hey man, what happened? Well, I had paid this dude and he had taken a stolen credit card and paid for it. And nobody ever got paid. Thieves took the money. The turf guy was out the money. I was out the money. And I ended up having, the guy gave me a hell of a deal, but I ended up having to, pay twice as much because I thought I was getting this deal on the internet. And that was without AI. That was just, I got duped on Facebook. So it is going to be a time where people are going to have to be uber, careful. I worry about the boomers probably the most because they're the most susceptible. But, I'm pretty good at spotting AI fakes, but they're getting so good. They're getting really hard to differentiate.
It is so difficult. And I tell everybody, like, look, if the salespeople who have the networks are the ones who are going to be successful. The ones who are depending upon the lowest price deal and, in and out projects and get rich quick schemes, all that stuff's going to evaporate because it's going to get to a point where people have been burned enough and they're just going to I'll pay more for my buddy. And again, I understand that that's getting more back to a barter type economy.
Yeah, but I mean, I will not buy anything that's technology, anything off Marketplace or any of those sales sites. It's too easy. 9 times out of 10, if it's a technology-based item, it's probably too good to be true. Unless you know that person or you physically talk to them. But even one, man, there was another one I talked to on the phone. I still got the wool pulled over me. This was after the sod thing. I tried to buy a newer iPhone and come to find out, man, by the time I got my hands on the iPhone, it was was a Chinese iPhone. It was an iPhone, but I couldn't use it in the States, and I, was out $1,000. And so like, I will never buy anything on Facebook. And I'm pretty savvy, man.
Yeah.
I come from a world where I've learned a lot, and I'm pretty savvy. At least I like to fancy myself, and even I've gotten taken. So it's, you really do have to be careful. Kind of sticking on the privacy thing, I just want to get your thoughts on it. And, there's the surveillance piece out there, facial recognition at the airport, at the store, on the street cameras, the ones that are just watching you all the time. Where's the line between useful and it being Orwellian? I mean, you're seeing it in China, where they can recognize you, social credit. Like, do you think we're all headed that way? And
yeah, I mean, it's a big topic right now. Flock.
the flock cameras, yeah.
Yeah.
They pull for those of you who don't know, the flock cameras are the license plate reader cameras, but those are being expanded to facial recognition, and the flock cameras are already in a lot of big cities.
Mm-hmm. And again, China has shown a blueprint in society for what can be done with the technology. And I could tell you, I worked for a Fortune 500 company, and we sold systems for example, casinos and games to be able to tell when people are doing counting and stuff. I've done things for manufacturing, lean manufacturing, to do automatic quality control, batteries, hitting the batteries off that were malformed before they get shipped to customers, stuff like this. So the technology is rudimentary at this point. I mean, you could set this up at your house. I do. If you were to drive by my house or park at my house, I capture your driver's license. And I do that for my own security, and it's copied to the cloud. Because again,
you said driver's license or like driver's plate?
Plate.
Oh, I was like, how are you getting people's driver's license by them showing?
Their plates are detected and recorded. So I think the government is doing this for altruistic reasons, and then it's being exploited by criminals. And whether they work for the government or not for the government, they're criminals. And I could tell you, I have plenty of experience working in government, and people do use government resources nefariously.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I want to know where my ex-girlfriend is right now. That's wrong. It is done so often, but it's still wrong. And I understand the discussion. That is a policy and person thing. We are a people, and we all need to come together and agree on what's best for us and our children and our future. And that's the policy we need to put in place. And like I said, the technology's always been there. What you do with it, you need to have all the people on board. And it's seemingly that a lot of people aren't. I don't know if you ever heard the term, the Overton window.
Mm-mm.
The Overton window is this area where what is what is a policy that is okay by the public? Here is where we all agree is good, and here's what we all agree is bad. And a lot of politicians and media and other people pay a lot of money to move that needle so that a policy that was something that is not acceptable by most Americans becomes acceptable. And that is a huge game that I am glad I'm not involved with.
Yeah, dude. Last one, at least on the privacy thing. Give the person listening or watching this one thing that they can actually do this week to take a little control back. Not a lecture, but what's like something people can do to try to take a little more control of their own privacy?
Number one is start paying for the services and don't use free ones. Heavily recommend doing that.
Give me an example of that. Like,
so, as an example, paying the $20 a month for an AI account so you can disable them tracking the information. Get an iPhone where you can say, ask not to track, right? Buy the iPhone from Apple, unboxed from your provider. right? So many things when you buy from the store that have that service, they lock it, they put all kinds of apps on it. So, you know, privacy is one of those things that you could take too far, but there's some common sense things to do. Like use a password change, a password app, right? And have a different password for every single service. Don't share passwords. You know, there's lots of things that are just good hygienic things that people just don't do.
The problem becomes though, and I mean, I totally understand what you're saying, but now every single thing you need needs a password. So it's like, you know, in the day and age when everything is online, from your bank to your insurance to, God, you name it, your telephone service, your car
registration for the government.
Is there a app that you recommend to help track passwords? Because, you know, a lot of us use the same passwords because, like, dude, I can't remember 100 passwords. How do you keep track of that?
So for the Apple users out there, they have an Apple password manager. You could do that. You can even recommend the password and then save it. So that's something that I use so that I really only have to remember the Apple passwords. And frankly, I trust Apple more than I do other providers. I do own Apple stock. Not a lot, not enough of it. But, you know, Google also does that as well. So, you know, a lot of these password problems are being solved if you use the technology. But I, like everybody else, am very poor in my hygiene when it comes to passwords. Everybody is. That's why it's exploited all the time.
Let's kind of talk about, like, you know, business. We've really covered a lot of stuff on the job. I mean, I think we've established that AI is going to change the work sphere or the workplace, but it's not going to get rid of human interaction. I really do think that's been overhyped. Is it going to change? Absolutely. I mean, the things that people are doing now, there are some jobs that are going to be replaced, but it's also going to create new opportunities. It's going to create other jobs. So I think we've kind of talked about that. But give me the long view. Every time a machine changed everything, people said the exact same thing. You know, you keep coming back to the steam engine. That's a lot of the things that you and I talked about last night. I mean, not the steam engine all night, but how that whole situation kind of fits into this conversation.
Yeah, right now we're seeing mostly marketing and tech jobs being impacted by AI and call center. You know, those three areas are heavily impacted. Everything's going to be impacted to the point where, you know, we talked about plumbers, right? We're going to have a situation where you can hire less experienced plumbers and then they'll be able to go take a picture, get some of the basics of what they need to do, right? So instead of having a mentor-mentee type of situation, you know, companies are going to go through and just give an app for those people. So I just want to be clear, everything's going to be impacted by this. So just like, remember when nobody had a tablet, nobody had a smartphone, and now everybody has an app. Instead of having all these like code scanners and you go to a concert and now they just pull up their iPhone and they dock their iPhone with your iPhone, and there's no ticket takers anymore. There's no, all of that tech has been replaced digitally. It's going to be like this with AI. And what it's going to do is complicate what everybody's jobs are. Instead of doing something that the same thing every day long, every day you're doing the same job, you're having the same inputs, the same outputs, you have a very static job. Those are going to be replaced by, you're going to have to do heavy thinking, managing people. We're going to have to manage people because those are the important things. So a lot of the focus around business is going to be around people because AI is going to deal with the tech for you.
Very interesting. Here's the one that actually kind of keeps parents up. I talk to this a lot with my other friends that are parents. A lot of parents not necessarily worried about their job at the moment, but their kid's first job. People say the bottom rung of the ladder is getting sawed off. Do you believe that's true?
I don't. What we're doing is we're eliminating the grunt work at a business. So I do agree that earning your due, right? Paying your dues. Remember, you're my age. You understand the concept of paying your dues.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to be way different. That's going to be, so the hazing of putting all the grunt work on the newbie. And I remember when I started in telecom in the operations center, they made me do all the BS work, man. All the stuff that is just, here's 10 steps, do those 10 steps 100 times a day, right? And I did them. And then afterwards they said, now we don't need to do that. We have this software that does that for you. But you learn the hard way. So if the software fails, you could still do it. So I think some of that is in jeopardy because the people who are going to be mentoring, as I said, they're cutting the most expensive labor first, the most experienced people first. So that paying your dues and learning how to function without the tools is going to be degraded.
Which jobs currently do you think are currently a little more safe from AI?
The trades.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the trades, I could tell you, I think cybersecurity, even though it should be easily disrupted, nobody wants to trust the AI with cybersecurity, period. I get this call all the time. I'm in AI, I'm in tech. I talk to businesses all the time. I know Fortune 500. So people call me up and say, my kid's getting out of college. What should they do? And I said, find out whatever they're passionate about and then help them do it. The most important thing you could do for your kids is have them develop passion and follow it. You're going to get pain no matter what you do. You're going to get pain. That's life. Not everything's going to be rosy. But if you love what you do, you're willing to put up with it.
That's a great point. There's the other side of the fear the money side. Is this an AI bubble? And if it pops, does it take the regular guy's 401k with it?
Well, number one, it is a bubble. Fact. The question is it going to stabilize over time? I tend to think so. So what makes me think that the outcome isn't going to be a 401 shattering event is, and then I'm just talking about the AI side of things, is that, you got Google, you got Amazon, you got Microsoft. They have already well-funded monopolies of their own that they're taking those profits and pumping it into data centers and these new services to survive. The SpaceX, as an example, they have a very strong market of being a telecommunication company that's funding all of that. The ones that I'm most worried about are the ones that are not diversified, and that is OpenAI and Anthropic. Those are the ones that they are solely running on the fumes of the funds that they are given. They like to tell investors, look at what Amazon did. It didn't generate a profit for 20 years. But they did generate revenues that were completely sustainable. So I think there is a generally high market right now of price earnings. And the market is significantly overpriced. So that's a bubble completely separate from AI. So I'm not saying that your 401ks are safe, because when was the last time 401ks were ever safe?
Yeah.
You know, I could tell you there's a lot of people who were upset when the dot bomb popped. There were people who were upset at the Great Recession and when real estate prices collapsed. You know, we are at a perpetual motion machine of bubbles and diffusion, bubbles and diffusion. So when you get in and when you get out of that roller coaster ride determines that. But yes, I can definitely see an impact to the market at some point. And I could definitely see some of these AI companies, the two I pointed out, that do not have a safety net, because I believe this, that people are using AI and they're expecting AI to do something it will never be able to do. And they are blaming other problems on AI. And after a while, investors are going to be upset about it.
Yeah, I mean, you see all those ads on social media, Meta, Google, like, hey, buy our little app if you have a business, and we'll create all these market things for you, and we guarantee you 20x. Yeah, buy a couple of them. I've tried 2 of them. They did 0. So, I mean, this idea that, you got access to AI now and you're going to be a millionaire. Good luck with that. Now, I will tell you, if you have a solid idea and you do have a solid plan and you have a business idea and, you still put a lot of elbow grease into it, AI can help you with that plan. But if you think you're going to tell AI to make you a millionaire, it's not going to happen, man.
I mean, there's a lot of people who use AI for day trading. And, if you're going to gamble your money, I would trust AI better than my gambling skills. I'll tell you that. But that doesn't mean you should gamble.
No.
Again, I have this problem of every time I go to Vegas, people are like, whoa, did you win anything? I'm like, no, it's Vegas.
Nah, dude, Vegas wasn't built on you winning.
Yeah. Look around, man. These are smart individuals. So, I would tell everybody, AI is a great technology and it's a tool. If you think it's a quick scheme, it's not. And I have a lot of people who think, oh, you're a founder? Oh, that must have been so much fun. I mean, yeah, it was fun, but it was 60-hour weeks. It was, not seeing my family. It was asking people to trust in me, their careers and their paychecks, right, had to keep flowing. It was nothing but stress. And, this is why, I provide so many tools on my new companies to help people understand what they're getting into and make sure that they have a solid, viable plan so that they can be successful. I wouldn't want anyone to be a founder just because they have an idea. They need to have an idea. They need to have a plan. They need to have a product or service, and they need to have proper support. And if you can't pull that together, maybe you shouldn't do it. Maybe it's a hobby. I have lots of hobbies.
Yeah.
They don't make any money. They waste a lot, actually. But they give my life fulfillment. So, turning a hobby into a career is not common.
Most supplements are built for guys who work out 3 times a week and want to look good at the beach. That's cool, but that's not who I build Hoplite for. Hoplite is built for people who run towards, operators, performers, people who choose the hard thing when everyone else opts out. 4 products: creatine, hydration, pre-workout, and a cognitive mushroom supplement that'll make you question why you ever settle for caffeine alone. Stack them or run them solo. We've got bundled options built around how you actually perform, not how a marketing team thinks you should. If that's you, go to hoplitenutrition.com and join the tribe. Get 15% off your first order. Hoplite, for those who run towards.
I kind of want to hit the data center thing one more time. Maybe we got it all out, but everybody's suddenly up in arms about all these data centers. They're drinking all of our water. They're burning all our power. You called it a lot of media panic. So what's real? What's the hype? And why do they even need something like so big? I mean, they seem like they're building them all over the place. Do we really need that many data centers? Or
and then some, and then some, because right now, as I said, there are 3 little niches in the industry that are heavily using AI. Once it hits healthcare, once you are turning CPUs in a data center into years of people's lives, right? You think it's going to be worth it then? I'll sign up, I'll pay $500 worth of compute if I can add, 5 years of my life.
Are these data centers really destroying the land? I don't know that I've intelligently looked into this enough to have an opinion.
You're talking to a person that asks the question all the time. My consulting roots come into play right here. It's like, depends on your definition of destroying the land, right? I could tell you, if you're going to build it on a pristine meadow and forest and beautiful creatures, maybe. If you're going to build it, like, for example, love the show Landman, right? There's a podcast called Boomtown that's based upon. And if you listen to that, you hear that they burn out in the desert, burn all the excess gas into the air, burning it, just light it on fire. Now imagine, if you will, you didn't burn it, you put it in a pipe, put it into a power, and ran a data center out in the middle of the desert off the free burning that we're doing anyway. Is that ruining the environment? Again, would you trade, desert property that nobody's living off of, that somebody with their hard-earned money bought and paid for, and help advance civilization with it? Is that worth it? I think it's up to the audience to decide that question. I mean, I think there's a line.
I would love to see those people that are protesting the data centers. It's like, all right, man, have you ever used AI? Do you Google anything? Do you use Meta? Do you use Google? Because that's essentially who's building a lot of these things. To my knowledge, it's Meta, OpenAI, Anthropic. But a lot of and again, man, I'm sure there's a couple people that live in the woods and camp, and I see both sides of the argument. But I'm with you, man. Like, we live in a small town, the community where I happen to live in, and like, there's some people in that town that just do not want change. And this was a one light town. Don't really have much, and we have like a Sonic and a Bush's Chicken. And I remember when they were going to build a McDonald's, and the whole town was up in arms. Not the whole town, but a lot of the older retired folks. Why would we do that? It's like, man, it's change, it's progress. You can't fight it for forever. Now, I also understand the people that moved here to retire, and they wanted this retirement life, and they waited their whole life for it. So, I see both sides of the coin. So I'm always, kind of stuck in the middle. I don't know that I have an opinion, maybe because I'm not directly affected here locally by data centers, but they are building one 30 minutes from here, actually 2. And so it's a conversation that people in our circle have. My neighbor, he's in charge of, building one of those data centers. And so, we've had this conversation. So it definitely is. It's why I didn't want to skip the topic. I don't know that.
Again, there's a line, right? There's always a line. But I would ask the person who's dead fast against it no matter what, and say, okay, if you, your wife, your children, your parents have cancer, and they can use AI to save their life, then is it okay?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if you say yes to that, how can you say no to the infrastructure that delivers that? No. And again, I'm of the opinion of, things can be done properly. But unfortunately, a lot of times things are done improperly. So, it comes to, there is a discussion, but the problem is always any solution to make people do things the right way that isn't voluntary ends up to be more trouble than it's worth. So I'm of the opinion that there's not a really good solution to this. And the more that you see the hype, they're just going to put them in outer space.
For the small business owner listening, the roofer, the supplement brand, the 3 to 10 employee shop, where's the actual upside? What's the first thing they should hand to AI and the first thing they absolutely shouldn't?
The first thing is the business second opinion. As a businessman myself, who have people relying upon them, and that is interested in the integrity of my name and the value I provide, I want to make sure I'm doing the best possible job and providing the best possible services. So I use AI to make sure that I'm doing precisely that. And I recommend any business person to explore how AI can help them by asking AI. That's number one. And congruent to that is, as a businessman, I'm always in situations where I've never been in yet, right? I do have 30 years experience now, which is shocking, of this variety to lean upon, but even 30 years isn't enough. You know, my dad, I reach out to him regularly and bounce things off of him. Why? Because he is significantly older than me and has seen more things than me. I reach out to you and ask you questions. I reach out to Chris, ask him questions. Why? Because we're all great human beings who've been through things and I can leverage. I do the same thing with AI. And then based upon multiple inputs from multiple smart things, I devise a strategy that I'm willing to take that I think is going to be successful. And I can do this much quicker with AI so that I spend less time worrying and more time executing, right? If you have a vision that you believe in, that you've researched, you can execute and spend all your time executing, you're going to be much more successful.
Awesome. The other group screaming about AI is the creative folks, right? Hollywood, screenwriters, the effects people. AI is putting us out of work. You've got a spicier take that it might actually hand the little filmmaker a shot that they never had. Square that.
So you got to look at the bar of entry into the content game. Now, YouTube has reduced this significantly, right? Nobody would be funding me to create a weekly podcast if the bar wasn't low enough. And the bar is. You know, I have my network of really smart people, really passionate people, people who are trying to help others in digital transformation. And we produce that for extremely cheap, right? And it has helped people. I've had people reach out to me and say, Shawn, what you're saying, what you're doing is helping my business, right? And that's the Digital Leaders Podcast. And that wouldn't be possible without AI, without YouTube, without, StreamYard, right? Being as cost effective as it is. Now, you add in more tools, things like we talked about Cdance, which you could create a complete action 90-second clip of two people fighting each other. Now, do you know how much it costs in number of people to do an action sequence of that level? You're talking about hundreds of people to be able to do that. Now, if you are a storyteller and you want to tell your story, how you can convince people to give you money to tell that story and how many people you can convince is a bar you need to cross. And you will see a lot more people going the direction of, hey, I'll just build it myself. and I'm going to create this. I'm going to release it on YouTube. And I could tell you this, like I had an idea for a novel back in COVID. And recently I was wondering whether or not AI could help me create a fictional novel. And over a weekend, I created a first draft. Now, is it great? Is it going to win awards? Is it going to make a lot of money? I don't know. I don't think so. But what it told me is what the tool can do and what the tool is capable of. And I use that novel and put it in the hands of people to show what the limits of the technology are currently. They're only going to get better. So, I think it's an inevitable. Every part of society is going to be impacted by AI at some point or another. The best thing everybody can do is learn up, have the skills, and constantly question your plan, your attack, how you can make your customer's life better, because that's what's going to be important, not the technology. And focusing on your customer, focusing on the value you provide for them, or in your case, your audience, is the goal. And everybody who's been focusing on everything else, those are the ones who aren't going to be successful anymore.
Yeah, we've really tried to, at least me personally, has tried to really figure out, what people are interested in, right? In a day, in an age where, God, everything seems so fake, phony, clickbait. I mean, yeah, we put some clickbait titles on YouTube, but that's just to get people to tune into the actual content that we created. But it's a lot of work. And I think people have no idea, like even running a simple podcast, man, like, people think we've got some views and likes and that those views and likes automatically transform into monetary gain. Those two aren't mutually exclusive. And, Meta and Google both they're changing the algorithm. I mean, just last summer, they changed some of their ad suitability stuff because the AI slop, if you will, AI YouTube channels, people were creating all these things with AI, but a lot of it was fake, and people were doing it. So Google did a bunch of updates to catch all that, and a lot of podcast YouTube channels took a massive hit, especially on the monetization side. I mean, we got cut almost by 80% for a while. We had to really build back up. And that was devastating to us at the time because we're a very small operation, overhead. So again, man, like I think people need to understand that you have to continue to innovate. You do have to continue to think about the product. AI can't do everything for you. I hope if anybody gets anything out of this conversation is that, AI is a tool and it can help if you want it, but it's not going to save you. It's not going to kill you either. It's what you make of it, I think. And I think a lot of people that aren't using, if you're curious out there, you should definitely get out there and try it. Try it for something simple. Ask it a simple task. I use it all the time to understand history. Sometimes I'll use it like in church. A lot of times you go to church, depending on the type of church you go to. I just started going back, but the pastor throws a Bible verse out there, and I'm a context guy, especially as a guy with a podcast. When we cut shorts, I'm always trying to give people the context instead of just some clickbait small story. But I've used it to research like the Bible, the passages, that the pastor's talking about. Hey, what's the context behind that? What was so-and-so saying? It's fascinating. And it's, if you're a curious person, AI is a fun place to spend some time.
Oh yeah. For those of you who hang out on Wikipedia and fall down that rabbit hole until 2 a.m, AI is 100 times worse.
Yeah.
Before we recorded, I showed you my chat history, and what I use it for is everything, and it enriches my life, right? That's why I use it. I don't use it because it's easy. I don't use it because it's cheap. I use it because it enriches my life and helps my customers succeed.
Yeah.
And if you're in a business and your business does not depend upon your customers succeeding, I don't know why you started it.
Yeah, great point. I want to transition now, talk a little bit about the military. You got a massive military audience. And I did get this question. I reached out to a couple of my close friends and told them you were coming on and, just see what questions they have. And overwhelmingly, the one I got the most was, are we actually heading towards machines that decide who lives and who dies on a battlefield, or is that just Hollywood?
Oh, absolutely. That you see it today in the Ukraine war.
Mm.
You know, they are taking, remember we were talking about Flock and that I do license plate at my house identification. Well, they built those into drones that cost $3,000, and they're crippling the oil economy of Russia right now with it. So what they do is they do image recognition of the fuel trucks, and they shoot them to fly a pattern that goes down the roadways. And then when it identifies a fuel truck, it runs into it. And this is all possible because of image recognition. And so this is just yet another tool in the battlefield. Humanoid robots are coming, right? I know they're fun videos right now. You could see them all get into a bad loop and freak out and destroy themselves. But you know, this is coming. You know, my oldest wants to be a robot inventor, and I just don't have the heart to tell him that it's going to be too late. You know, he's got 10 years before he gets out of college, and in 10 years, you know, you'll have a personal chef. You know, you won't need someone to clean your house. You won't need someone to fix your plumbing. You're not going to need someone to do your lawn work. It's going to be a robot. And, you know, the current numbers is the expectations can be like $25,000. Now, if I tell you for $25,000, you can buy a used Accord, Honda Accord, or have somebody who lives in your house that does all your laundry, that cooks and cleans for you, that does your yard work, that organizes everything and puts everything away so that you could just walk and it, you know, you open a door, you leave it open, it will come behind you and close. Everything automated to your house for $25,000, and you'll be able to lease it for $150 a month. What do you think is going to happen? This is the future, and
you're saying this is not the distant future.
No, this is 5-10 years away.
Where's the moral floor for you? Is there a line a machine should never be allowed to cross on its own?
Yeah, I think Asimov did a good job of creating the 3 rules. I mean, pretty self-explanatory. It's not alive, we are. It does what we say, when we say, unless it's to hurt another. I mean, I think very smart people a long time ago thought of these problems, and it behooves us to listen, learn, and apply. But unfortunately, I think we're going to have to learn our own rules, as we do with every technology. I mean, I remember when data centers started. I don't know if you remember the cloud. You know, the cloud. That's all everybody said. Well, they told everybody, look, take all your servers and everything and push it in the cloud. You're going to save money. And then a year later, they're like, wait, we're spending twice as much. Oh, yeah, but look how convenient it is. So they didn't sell it on convenience. They sold it on saving money, which is the same exact thing that AI. Everybody's like, you're going to move to AI, it's going to save money. It's not going to save you money. It's going to cost you way more, but you're going to create value from it.
Let's set the killer robot stuff aside. You see a totally different military AI story that never makes the news, the one that makes our people better at their jobs. Where does it actually help the analyst, the planner, and the guy on the ground?
As you know, this is a very big world, huge world. And we have, 100 years at this point, documentation from our military of what works, what doesn't work, what the planning of yesteryear was, the amount of effort spent on military planning is in the multi-trillions at this point in U.S. history. That data is incredibly valuable to new planners, so that when something happens that no one thought could happen, would happen, should happen, AI can help build a new plan from the thousands and thousands of other plans that have been well researched, well trained, so that the most important people, the people on the battlefield, have the best possible plan and have been trained for something similar, and they're not having to invent things on the fly. Now, for the people who haven't watched this program, you've seen there's a lot of very smart, very brave men who had to figure it out. And figuring it out requires heroics, but I would rather everybody come home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, again, man, when you consider a F-18 pilot who has to go behind, or an F-16 pilot going behind lines in Iran, if you will, because the Iran rescue was quite a big deal, big topic, cost a lot of money, and we, killed a lot of equipment, which I could care less about. But, if we could send a drone over there to do and not have to send a human, like, why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we? Unless, because drones nowadays, and I'm talking about the bigger unmanned drones, the Reapers, and, those are still being flown by humans. So there's still a human interaction. So there's still a human deciding to take the shot or launch a missile or whatever. So it's like, why wouldn't we put that into? But I don't know. There's people out there that may totally disagree with me. And I'm not trying to get rid of pilots or airplanes. I'm just thinking of the human cost of, because we can always get more stuff. Like, I saw people pissed off about the Iran thing when we blew up millions and millions of dollars of equipment to save our guys to get them out. It's like, who cares? Like, the people that say that, like, I was truly baffled. Even if you don't like America and you don't agree with the war and you don't like all the different buzzwords that are associated with this Iran conflict, which this isn't the conversation I want to have, but like, who cares, man? We saved a dude's life. We can build more stuff. We can make more planes. We can buy more equipment. We can't get another, it was the Wizzo on the ground. We can't get another weapons officer. That guy has a family, a mom, a dad, brother, sister, kids, maybe,
And he put it on the line. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That there's a thing, integrity is a big part of what I think is important. When you ask somebody to risk it all, you better be willing to lose all the money, right? I can understand people being timid and giving their life up for others, but money should not be part of the discussion.
Yeah, I totally agree. And then the hope side, because, not everything's doom and gloom. Is there a version of AI in the military that actually brings our people home safer? I think that's a conversation we're having, right? Like,
it better be. Otherwise, don't use it.
Yeah.
Again, and I talk about business and profit and all this kind of stuff that has nothing to do with the military, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The profit is the people, and saving lives is important. Doing the job with as little loss of life, in my opinion, on both sides is important. You got to get the job done, but I'd prefer the job done without any loss of life. I'd prefer, people in the wrong accept that they're wrong and be men about it and say, but I am also 48 years old and I have my eyes fully open to this world.
Yeah.
Sometimes, a line has to be kept.
Great point. Somebody on your show, can you tell the audience what the name of your YouTube channel is in your show? Because there's a lot of great information on there too.
The Transformation Leaders Podcast. So I say all the time, today is never a better time to build, right? You have all the tools to realize any dream, to solve any problem. And as we talked about, one of my lines I talk about all the time is a solution is three things: people, process, and technology. Technology is the static. It is what it is. It's the least important thing. People are the most important thing. So on that program, we talk to leaders, builders who talk about their story of being able to change the status quo and the outcome that they generated and the problems they had to overcome to get there. We provide lots of different examples and case studies to inspire people to change because, as you stated, we all have to evolve. Today is not going to be tomorrow. And my personal belief, that's a good thing because there's a lot of things happening today that we can get better at as a person, as a people, as a civilization, as a company. And if we do not improve, other people will replace us.
I talked a couple about the flaws. I know we've talked a little about doom and gloom and a little bit overall about AI and some of the things it does well. And I've bitched a little bit about it, but I want to talk about some things so people understand. And somebody on your show had a line that really kind of stuck with me when I was listening to some of it, that AI has never stubbed its toe. Can you translate that? What it's actually saying about the limits of the thing?
It's not real.
Yeah, it's totally.
It's not real. I mean, everybody's like, well, it's got consciousness. And I'm like, I understand if you program something to act a certain way, and then you're like, oh, look, no, somebody had to type in and say, okay, I want you to do it this way, and I want you to have to do that. I mean, you know this. Prompting, you tell it to act a certain way. A human is providing that. Now, it is acting as if, simulating a human is not a human, right? It does not know what will work and won't work until someone does it. Now, can it do it? You've seen this. AI will run tests itself to see if its guess is right, and then it will retry until it gets it right. That is automation. That is not intelligence. Intelligence is, what we do all day long. Like, okay, should I be a good guy and have oatmeal for breakfast, or should I be the bad guy and have a donut?
I had a donut, just so you guys know.
I had a oatmeal. But, this is the difference. It doesn't have wisdom, right? That's what we provide. It's intelligence, but we have wisdom. And I can tell you a famous quote that I use all the time. Albert Einstein says, learning from the mistakes of others is true wisdom. And he rather be wise than smart. And I find that true. I mean, and we talked about this yesterday, one of the tweets I saw from Patrick Bet David was, as a parent, my job isn't to make my kids happier. It is to make them wiser, faster. And I'm like, wow, that is true wisdom there, right? That's what parents should be doing for their kids.
I mean, AI also doesn't actually know what's true. It knows what's been written down a lot. What does that mean for a person using it to research something that matters? A medical thing, a legal thing, finances?
It shouldn't be taken as writ, right? You're talking to a B+ student, okay? If you're talking to a B+ student and you have no other recourse, okay. But as I mentioned, I use it when I'm in a blind spot. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to trust. That AI is not trying to steal money from me. It's not trying to lie to me. It has no ulterior motive other than the people who have made it, right? So I can ask it questions that I'm not embarrassed to ask, when I'm too embarrassed to ask a human, right? If I'm being stupid, which I'm sorry, everybody is being stupid every once in a while. I can get educated in the privacy of my own mind. And then I could take that knowledge and decide what to do with it. It should be treated as an advisor, never as a decision maker. This is where people in corporate America are having a problem right now. They're leaning on it for decision making. No, your job is to decide things. The company pays you to make decisions. It can advise you, right? But I would still, especially when it comes to life or death matters or taxes, you lean on the expert, but you get educated by an advisor so that you can, frankly, test the expert. So I talk about this with healthcare all the time. When we're going to meet a new doctor, me and my wife, I do a lot of the talking because she wants me to do, because as everyone could tell, I can talk. But I will come in there with 3 questions for the doctor. 1, a stupid question, something that's completely simple. I'll ask that question to the doctor, and if he scoffs or, gets, flustered by the question, that's going to tell me something. The next is I ask a really, really hard question, right? That I understand the answer for. And that's a test for him of whether he knows hard things. And then I ask him a regular question that I want answered. And I take those 3 and examine the answers to that so I know who I'm talking to. Because that doctor, first and foremost, is a person, and people have bad days. People get frustrated. Getting an understanding of who I'm talking to when I'm asking for advice and how much I should listen to them. Doctors are important, but not all doctors should be listened to.
Oh, and they're fallible, just like any other human being. They're very fallible.
And give them grace because they're trying to help you.
Yeah.
Right. But your life is your life. You're the decision maker. Never think that you're not the decision maker.
Yeah. And nobody's more invested in you than you.
Or it should be, at least.
Should be, yeah. Hallucination. It's a real thing in AI. Everybody uses that word. What is it, and why does it happen, and is it ever going away?
So hallucinations are the fact of the 2 major problems that we talked about before. So number 1, if you don't give it data, it doesn't know the answer. If you're not giving it context, it's guessing, right? And when you have a gun to its head, it's going to be extremely creative and passionate about that guess. And when it is extremely passionate about a guess that's completely wrong, that's called a hallucination. It's very simple, fancy word for you're doing it wrong. Now, they try to make these systems, and we talked about Fable earlier, that are much more intuitive and can infer things a lot better and guess a lot better. But, I don't know about you, I'd rather do the due diligence to get the right answer than have it guess for me. I can guess.
Well, and I guess the scary part isn't always that it's wrong. It's wrong, and it's confidently wrong with an authoritative voice. How does a normal person catch that? Or does it go back to what we talked about? Like, you have to be a human. You have to not just overly trust it. I don't trust my AI for nothing.
No, you should never trust your AI. And like I said, you should be dating, not marrying.
Oh, yeah.
But this is where, people call it prompting, but it's just the question that you're asking. If you're going to ask AI a yes or no question, you're doing it wrong, right? You need to be saying steel man and straw man, the pluses and minuses. Like, I do this all the time. I see something in the media that incenses me, right? This is how they make their money. So I go through and I'm like, okay, instead of stewing about this or calling a friend to vent to it, I'm going to go into AI and say, okay, steel man and straw man this. Media should be doing this, but I'm having AI do it for me so that, again, I don't get all retribution and vengeance in my mind. I like a calm life. So I do that, and I understand the pros and cons of things and realize, yet again, we're all humans and everybody has a perspective and both sides think they're right. And it's up to me to decide where the line is.
You've got a story about a company that was about to spend $2 million to fix an AI problem that turned out to actually be a tiny configuration issue.
Yeah.
Tell us that story, and what does it say about the whole, how the whole world is treating all this stuff right now?
The biggest problem with AI in corporate America is they're not going after quick wins, they're going after the big fish. So here was a company that they said, okay, we're going to use AI for knowledge base. We're going to take all of our stuff for knowledge base, put it in here so that when agents, people who are helping people over the phone, have a question, we'll run it and get an answer. And then they spent 18 months doing all the things that need to be done. And they got to the very end when the agents are saying, look, it's 50% right. Not 85, 50% right. So I don't know if you know, 50% is a flip of the coin. So what's the point? If you're going to be 50% right, there's no value. So they came to us and says, we know what the problem is, which is always fun. When a customer says, we know what the problem is, we just want you to solve the problem. It's like, then why do you have us here? It always raises an eyebrow. Like, if you know what their problem is, then you should just solve your problem. But they said, no, it's our content. Our content's written all wrong. And part of my company was to rewrite people's content and make sure that it's right, it's accurate. And, we had a whole project on that. And then they said, okay, while we're doing that, we'll bring in the AI experts to look over everything else. So we looked over everything else, and they had a configuration issue. So I talked about the matrix, cat and dog house, right next to each other. Well, when you're breaking down your data to be added into that matrix, you got to break it down into consumable bits. You can't just send, the Library of Congress in. You need to say, okay, we're going to take this part and take this part, and then it has to kind of overlap so you don't miss any of the context. If you cut your content up in the middle, you're going to lose context. And you have to break things up into pieces, and they misconfigured that part. And we pointed it out, and, it addressed their problem. Now, it didn't make my company too thrilled because, the money is rewriting all their content. We improved it by 10, 15% on the content rewrite, but we moved them from 50 to 75% accurate on one simple configuration change. And this is part and parcel of the problem that people have is that this is complex software in the back end. When you're solving problems, you could get really close to the mark and get value. But a lot of people are having trouble, especially in business and corporate, getting the accuracy to the level where they were hoping it to be. They say the devil is in the details. So there's lots of things that trip people up. We talked about just some of your prompting techniques. You were like 80% there, but the difference between 80% and 90% of doing things with AI the correct way versus almost the correct way is a significant difference in outcome. And that's why I talk to people about, look, you need to know what you're doing. Like, getting started is fun, going through, but saying, hey, I'm not getting what I expect out, and assuming the software doesn't work, which is what they were talking about. They said, well, AI just doesn't work because of they just didn't know they were configuring it wrong.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's super important as we transition, well, not transition, but to understand personal use versus AI use for a business, because you can do as much damage to your business with AI as you can really help it. And I think, that's why another reason why I designed this conversation, so that people could understand and hear it from a guy like you who does this for a living. Because we're going to get into what you do for a business using AI. But, if you have a business out there, you really need to take some time to understand what it is, how it works. Shawn and I were talking offline about, creating some type of I don't know, man, maybe either a training or something to help folks out there, because it's been so instrumental, just to me personally. And I recently helped a friend kind of start his AI journey, I guess, if you will. I actually flew out and helped him build something, and it's been super impactful in less than 3 weeks. He's just floored. And it really filled in some gaps for him. But if I hadn't have flown out there to show him how to do it, he could have obviously done it without me, but he would have been at an extreme disadvantage and maybe made some bad decisions. So,
I mean, I say this all the time. AI can get you there with very little information, a lot of the time, right? But when you have business on the line, right, and you can't handle, being wrong. Like, if this is like in healthcare, this is why healthcare hasn't been impacted as much, is because, people are trying to automate healthcare. That's just not going to happen. You augment, not automate with this. It can be impactful, but there's so many things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And that's really where I spend a lot of my time with my corporate customers, is helping them walk that line.
Yeah, can you walk us in? You have a consulting business. You actually have a couple different businesses, but I'll kind of just give you the floor. I'd love for you to explain to the audience kind of what you do, kind of where that was born out of. I'm sure we've alluded to a lot of it in the podcast, but so people can understand, especially if they would be interested in using your services down the road.
No, absolutely. So, my previous gig is I worked for a Fortune 500 company after I sold my company, doing a lot of the emerging technology space and think tankish type stuff. I walked in doing a lot of IoT, the image recognition stuff that we talked about. I helped them create several patents in the Web3 crypto domain, NFTs and stuff like this. And then I got heavily into the AI and did a lot of patents for them in that arena. And honestly, the opportunities that are available now that AI has hit its stride, are tremendous. And since I had my exit out of Oracle, I've been doing a lot of consulting with founders and helping them. And so what I did and decided my next focus in life is going to be is around accelerating founder outcomes. And
when you say founder, what does that mean to you?
So somebody who wants to create something, build something, elicit change. So you are a founder, right? You feel the need to tell these stories. And it is not something that is driven by monetary. It is something that you have to do, otherwise you'll die.
Yeah.
Founders are, another word for founders, I joke, is cultists. They are so fascinated. They've got the tiger by the tail and they're fighting it. And they believe that they can do something that has never been done before. I am a founder and I understand that. And I love founders and I love helping them navigate, because when I created a company, it was very lonely. It was something that I had to figure out things on my own through trial and error. And I hired the wrong people. I invested the wrong money. I used the wrong services. I did things wrong and I had to figure out the right way. And I wasted a lot of time and a lot of people's money and people's careers because I didn't know the right way to do things. And so I founded a company called Citus, which is Latin for agile, to accelerate founders and help them overcome things. And so for the most part, I get questions of, Shawn, like, I've got a great idea, I need to get it funded. Or the flip side is, hey, I get funded, now I need to deliver, right? And I help on both sides of that, helping people get to the outcome that they're looking for. Now, I also have portfolio companies, things that I have founded or friends have founded that I have intimate involvement with. I'm CEO of a company called Rapix, and that is basically in the telecom space. So what it's doing is being able to solve the problem I was talking about earlier, where it's hard to find people who are willing to sit in front of a screen all day and wait for something to break. You know, AI should be watching everything and trying to figure out what's wrong and then reach out to a human for decision making. This is AI native network automation. That is very big. We just had a great show in Copenhagen. We were finalists for 2 different projects. We were doing projects of the year. So really, really excellent things going on there in network automation for telecommunication space. But I also have my second portfolio company called Kinetic Tricks, and that's the one that hooked us up, right? So what Kinetic Tricks is at this point, some people know that AI is really good at creating code, right? To the tune of it makes really good coders 90 times productive. 90 times. So that means you're going to talk to somebody to build software for you. They should be able to do it for 90 times, not 90%, 90 times cheaper than they could before. So, you know, this means that we're in a golden age of software development. Why are we laying off all the developers? We're laying them off because software just doesn't get developed on its own. Somebody has to say, I have a business problem. Let's negotiate. A salesperson needs to sell these. The customer needs to know that these things are possible. And that's marketing. What are we doing from a sales and marketing perspective to make them 90x more? So right now, all you hear is Amazon laying off developers, Meta laying off developers, Oracle laying off developers. Well, that's because their salespeople and marketing cannot sell enough to keep them employed. And that's where Kinetic Tricks come into play. So Kinetic Tricks has AI agents that connect up to a sales team's email box into their customer relation database, keeps everything going so that the salesperson can focus on one thing, selling. And when humans make mistakes, which I'm a human, I make mistakes, and they say, a customer's like, hey, you know, write me an RFP for that, give me an invoice for that, I'll pay that, I'll buy that, write me an SOW. And I forget, guess what? The next morning I get an email from the bot saying, did you remember this person asked for that? I've been watching your email box. You didn't do it. Right? So it is what I try to tell people. I made the Iron Man suit for Tony Stark, right? Where Tony Stark is a sales guy. It used to be really good salespeople. When you knew that they could sell and they were really good at their job, you would buy a golf membership for them. Do you know why? Because they could go to the golf membership, hang out there, and these are all rich people who have problems, and they can create a network and he could sell more. That's why a golf membership was needed. Well, that's what my software does. It goes through and is constantly enriching the network of salespeople, because that's going to be the true currency of sales in the future. It is who you know. So I could tell you this because we've had conversations. You know my software, you know what I can do. You've talked to some of your friends already about what I do, and they have already called me and said, hey, and again, this is what this software does. It creates networks between people, and if you didn't need my services, that's fine, but you know people. And when they come to you and say, I'm having this business problem, you're like, hey, you should talk to this guy. This is what the future is going to be like. It's going to be people helping out other people for business gain. And, this is why I tell everybody, make sure you know who the people you're in business with, because that is going to be the vital part of your future. And don't get into business with people you can't trust.
There's a lot of bad actors out there too. I mean, we've seen it in our own show. Again, we've had to hire some part-time people to help us, whether it's editors or, marketing or whatever. And, I have a core group of people that I trust that I use from time to time, but it took a lot of bad experiences before I found the good one. And now, those good folks that I have, relationships, maybe I don't pay them directly or projects that we're going to do. I've taken my sweet time and using all my Spidey skills from my previous profession to make sure you're working with the right people. Because to your point, all it does, it takes one bad business relationship to tank a business. You know that better than anybody. That was part of your Oracle stories that some of that's private, but it's just, again, man, one poor, decision in a business can really, really tank you. And I think it's really a crux of this conversation as well, because we've hyper focused on AI. That's what this conversation was about. But one of the things that you work a lot with is on the human side of the business too. Like, you and I have talked a lot offline. Full disclosure, we haven't hired Shawn for anything. I definitely might in the future, but this is an absolute open conversation. You didn't pay to be here. I didn't pay you to be here. I asked you, to come here very excitedly, because I'm just excited about, there are, we talked about this yesterday. There is this misnomer of people in your community, engineers, very smart people, astute people, that they're kind of introverted and work in the dark and you know what I mean, don't like to be around people. You're the opposite. You're like the most extroverted, tech guy I've ever met, which has been super fun for me because you're super just, you're super passionate. Like, you love helping people, and granted, we can't all do that for free, right? Because you have kids and bills and everything too, but there's a couple things you've helped me on the side. I called you like, hey man, I'm doing this. Am I using the right program? You're like, you might want to check this program out. And then I remember, I think I called you like a week later, like, my God, bro, you saved my neck. So, it's fun. And I talk to Chris, pretty often. I know he's involved in one of those projects with you. And, we're always talking just about the what ifs and, what's happening and the possibilities. And it is a really cool time to be alive. And it's really cool, I think, if you get an opportunity to work with good people that you can trust, and that business relationship really is formed and you are on equal footing, man, sky's the limit,
Yeah, again, one of the other things that I'm doing a lot more of recently with the Sidus is working with venture capitalists and private equity, because, every story, there's two sides. You got the founders who are like, I've got a great idea, I need money to make it a reality. Now, because the bar is so low, and you could create software, I say like tissue paper, right? Software is like tissue paper now. You could just create it, throw it away. That creates an immeasurable problem for the bankers. They don't know what's real, right? It used to be, it was a qualifier. If you were smart enough to build the software, do what you wanted to do, and that you could convince people to help you build that, right? That would be a bar. And then they could recognize that bar. Now that bar is so low, you've got kids, not mine, but kids in high school that are creating games and posting them on iOS, on the Apple game store, and making millions, right? So what is real and what is not? And so I'm working with several of those to help them generate what I call a farm league, right? Of talent that can run businesses and execute. And so how do you become a good founder? Well, you start small and you learn your lumps and you get better and you grow. And then after a while, then if you've been through the sausage factory a couple times and created good returns and outcomes, then perhaps you get a bigger bite at the apple. And or if they have a portfolio company in trouble, right? They have talent they could pull in that they know has a track record of success, and they can plug those people in and they're a known quantity. This is what's missing, and why funding right now is so difficult for companies is because AI has made the bar so low, they don't know what's quality and what's not. They don't have a network, right? And that's what the value is right now. We know, Asher, I know what you can do. You know what I can do. So that is knowledge that they have a very hard time getting.
What kind of clients are you looking for? And, what's your ideal people that you like to work with?
I love working on both sides of the funding and the founder side. And like I said, typically founders are looking for two things. Either one, they need help executing or validating that they have executed. Or number two, they're looking at shining themselves up, getting the correct metrics in place to be funded. And a lot of people are very disappointed that those are difficult roads, much more difficult than they expect. They said, hey, the software works and everybody's happy. What's the problem? Well, you need to sell it. People don't want to fund ideas. They want to fund companies that have a track record of success. So teaching a little business to tech founders, I spend a lot of time doing. And then teaching tech to funding companies I spend a lot of time doing those too.
Yeah.
So there's a happy medium here. There's plenty of room for growth. What there is no room for is integrity problems.
We're going to plug our founding podcast into you at some point. See what we can do. How can people find you for your business stuff? And we're going to leave the links in the description as well, but some people might be listening.
The best way is to hit me up on one of the portfolio companies, kinetic-tricks.ai or rapix.app. But obviously the easiest way to get to me is through social media, and that is my LinkedIn, Shawn Ennis. And you should be able to find that on the LinkedIn. We'll make sure there's a link.
Yeah, I got all the descriptions. As we kind of close out this conversation, I just want to ask a couple more questions. The single free thing every listener should go sign up for, download first. Name it and why that one.
I tell everybody, because almost everybody has a Google account at this point, is to try out Gemini first, right? Go in there. Find a problem in your personal life that you're not worried about talking to your neighbor about. Like I had with the ISP or the pump issue, and give it a try. Just remember, it's not infallible. It's just think of it, worst case scenario, it's a direction. Ask it questions as you would if you hired an irrigation guy, right? Hey, why did this happen? This isn't working. Give me an explanation, and keep asking questions until you have a firm understanding of what's going on. Because to me, if you don't know what's going on with your problem, it's going to be a lot harder for you to solve it.
Great point. Your family move, you have the kids just talk to it, voice mode, out loud. Mm-hmm. Why is that the best on-ramp for somebody who's intimidated kind of by all this, or, want to explore it? Especially for kids, maybe.
I mean, I think people are intimidated and they're like, well, what do I type? I don't know how many times I've sat someone in front of AI. Almost everybody, I'd say, that I sat in front of AI the first time and they say, what do I type? Anything you want. Yeah. Go use Grok and do voice and just start having a conversation with it. Say, hey, where should I go on vacation? Right? And it'll start asking you questions like, hey, do you like this? Do you like that? And you get in there and say, eventually you could find out what you like. Like, this is another problem that I see people have. They're too busy to know what they like and what they don't like. And so they will just book a vacation, go there, and then I didn't like it. Like, okay, well, what'd you think? What were the options you had? What do you mean? I just picked something. Like, you could have a life-changing experience with a little bit of research. And now that the bar's so low, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. Give me the one habit, the talk to it like a consultant move, so a normal person gets a real answer instead of generic mush. And before you answer this, one of the things you and I talked about, I think it's important for the audience to hear. Early on when AI first came out, maybe last year, maybe even the year before, when people really started using it, the prompting was everything, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you're an expert in traveling. You had to give it all these prompts and all these, things so that it would understand. Is that still the case, or has it evolved a little bit?
Again, you're hitting me on my consulting roots. It depends. So, if you're just having a conversation, start at the beginning. I always recommend when you're having a conversation, start at the beginning. But if you are actually wanting it to create an outcome for you, create a structured prompt, right? So many examples online. Here's the beauty of AI is you could say, I don't know how to structure this prompt. Help me create the prompt. And it will help you create the prompt. Is there anything else that I should have in this prompt that I haven't in the prompt already? Yeah. And it'll tell you. It has to tell you. I mean, again, here is the thing that, the McKinseys, the management consultants of the world are running scared on. AI actually has to answer the question that you say. Better than me. You just heard me say depends, and I just changed so that just shows you why AI is so valuable, because AI would have just answered what you said and give you a straight answer. So, there is so much value in this tech, but the nuance is driving people wild. Yeah, I mean, you call it wrestling. The nuance is mind-bending. Like, okay, I didn't ask it the right. I don't know how many times I'm like, cancel conversation, copy paste, put it in there, let me change it because it went that way. It zigged when I was expecting it to zag. Yep.
Cut against your own interest for a second. When is AI the wrong tool? When should somebody shut it off and trust their gut, their team, or their experience?
For everything. If you're using AI to decision make, you're making a mistake. Stop. Right? If you're trying to get educated to make a proper decision, you will want to tell AI, okay, assume this is true and tell me why this is a true. Now assume why this is false and tell me why this is false. It's called steel manning and straw manning. That is everything. If you really want to understand the gravity of a decision that you need to make, do that, then pray on it. I'd recommend reading that before you pray, because if you're going to ask God, you better ask with some context. Yeah. Remember, you should say, what do they say? Be wary of what you ask for.
Yeah. Careful what you wish for.
Careful for what you wish for. So before you do your wish, you may want to ask what you're wishing for.
Wow. After all of it, the fear, the jobs, the war, the kids, give me the honest reason for hope. Why should the everyman walk away from this more hopeful than scared?
The amount of suffering civilization has due to ignorance is great. Now imagine if we could cut that ignorance in half. What kind of world are we going to have? How many people have thrown away their career doing mindless work that never moved the needle, that was only doing it because somebody needed to have X number of people underneath them, right? And what kind of life could they have had where they could take their will, their skill, their desire for life, and impact society, right? This is a tool for dreamers.
Yeah, that kind of brings me to my next question, because you said something, I think it was yesterday, and I want every, kid and every broke founder to hear this. You said that right now might be the luckiest moment in history to build something. Why now?
Because the bar is so low. You could build it twice in a weekend. I mean, like the cost of iteration of the past, I know it well, was really high in people, money, sanity, right? Now you could say, okay, build it 3 ways, and then you could test drive 3 ways. Like I see this on YouTube right now. It's a going fad. People will take one prompt and run it on 5 different platforms. And I talked about a guy making Age of Empires, a game from our youth, on a web browser, and built it on 5 different models just to see how the models do things differently.
Was there that much difference in each one of them?
Stunning.
Wow.
Stunning. Same exact prompt. So, it doesn't mean one model is better than the other. It means that the inputs are so nuanced. And again, this is, Mark Andreessen said this on a Rogan, called them AI vampires. And it's because they are so into the weeds that one word change here, this can do dramatic changes. And then you can put together a prompt that'll churn for an hour. And it's just like baking in an oven. What's going to come out?
I literally did that before you came over this morning.
And then you either get this euphoric, I did it. Or most likely you got, oh, I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
But the worst thing you could say is, well, it's technology's dumb. Unfortunately, there's way too much proof to the otherwise. The devil is in the details. You could get very far with just basic ask some questions and get education. If you're asking to output something that is going to last for the ages, and this is what I'm doing now, the kinetic tricks and stuff, I've got people depending upon this software to go to market with and to make business so that they could sell better and get more revenue so that they could keep paying their people. This stuff's important. And, 9 times out of 10, you end up with, snake eyes. Like it's hard. But the good news is you only have to be right once with software. When it's done and it's working, it will always work. So the best thing I could tell for people, the hope is your dreams can become a reality cheaper and more effectively than ever before. What is your dream?
Dude, what an amazing conversation, man. This was everything I hoped it would be. I spent a lot of time thinking about this. This was so out of my wheelhouse. I tried to do a lot of prep and planning, but again, when this is, I'm good at talking to people, obviously, but this was a very new topic for us. I was a little intimidated at first, because you just don't want to get it wrong, and it's kind of out of my comfort zone. But man, I really appreciate your time. You kind of really helped me design the interview plan to make sure that what I didn't want to do is go so far in the weeds. I blew everybody's head, but we wanted to give some kind of substance so that people could walk away from this conversation with a better understanding of AI. I mean, we didn't design this conversation to give you the specific tool to build your business, but hopefully we gave you ideas that will push you a little bit farther. So I really appreciate you taking the time to come and see us, for helping, for all the conversations we've had offline personally. I can't wait to continue to watch you grow and to learn from you. And if you're watching this, you've made it to the end, and you're still curious about some stuff. If you're on the business side, definitely reach out to Shawn and see how he can help you. But if there's some things that we missed in this conversation that you think would be super helpful, throw them in the comments. Shawn doesn't live super far from me. We can always bring him back and have a more focused interview if there's enough people that are interested. So I think we're kind of just starting to scratch this thing. AI's here to stay, and we're definitely here to hopefully help you guys, learn again in the future. This is not a topic that I want to shy away from. It's something and it's a way more fun than politics. Yeah. So anyway, as usual, man, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Thanks for listening. Everybody stay safe out there. If this helped you or you got something out of it, send it to a couple people, especially those boomers that don't understand AI at all, man. Definitely send it to them. Your mom, your uncles. I know I'll be sending this to my folks. So stay safe out there. If you can't be safe, be violent out here.